The story begins in the year 196, according to the Julian Empire calendar. A new sun has emerged in the country, the brightest and most powerful in the history of the continent. At this time, a new emperor was born. His name, Sionel Ulysses. Woodburg Sionel was the second prince who strongly resembled the first emperor of the country. He had the same blonde hair and blue eyes. It even went so far as to call him the reincarnation of the first emperor. However, he was born to a simple servant. The empress and the prince considered him a threat, so they forced him to behave quietly and not stand out. However, he survived all the hardships and was able to increase his own power. He won the struggle for the throne and overthrew the empress and the prince, and thus he received the crown. But there was another reason for his fame: the flower that grew in hell. Despite his sculptural beauty, he was given this nickname for his fighting skills and composure. People told how one prestigious noble family tried to convince him to marry, but many heard that in the end, the idea failed because the emperor was against it. Many people tried to negotiate marriage, but he did not pay the slightest attention to them. By the way, Sionel always had a loyal knight on his side. This knight is our heroine, Lindell Bodabachna, who, having perfected her aura at a young age and received the nickname of the Genius Knight, stood on the side of the second prince. The knights who followed her also joined Sunil's forces, and he came to victory in the battle for the throne. She was his right hand and the best knight. That is why the new emperor blessed Lindell, and the empire had a bright future as long as these two existed. However, on the day of the coronation, one situation occurred. The emperor asked Lindell to repeat the words. For some unknown reason, our heroine told him that she wanted to leave the palace. Sionel, perplexed, assumed that he had a hearing problem. The knight who promised to be his right hand wanted to leave him at the coronation ceremony. He did not understand how he should agree to this, and therefore asked to explain the reason to him. Just as the girl wanted to begin her story with explanations, suddenly at that moment, she began to cough. Sionel told her in a quiet voice that she had not been using her aura lately, and he had been told that she had been vomiting blood. Turning to her, he said he couldn't believe it. Was it really true? Was that really why she wanted to leave him? Lindell, confused, began to tell His Majesty that she did not know what he was thinking, but everything was not as it seemed. His reaction was still different from her expectations. Since the empire had plenty of excellent knights, she only had to explain everything well. The girl said that she was fine, she had always been healthy. The guy looked at her with tears in his eyes and asked in bewilderment if she really wanted him to believe these words after she coughed up blood. Sitting down next to her, he said that she had always been the type to endure anything for him, and even this time, she had decided to simply run away so as not to bother them with her illness. Lindell could not believe that the emperor was crying and could not understand what he was talking about. She told His Majesty that she was not ill. However, he said that she could not lie to him. He asked her to be honest with him because he could only expect this from her. What could they do? Sionel said they could bring healers, or if they failed, they would look for priests. He would search the entire empire to find a cure. He hugged her and asked her not to even think about leaving him and facing death alone. Pressing his face against her shoulder, he asked her not to leave him because he would not allow even death to take her away. Continuing to hug her, he assured her that she would never die and that she should not do this. While Sionel held on to her so tightly, our heroine had no idea that he thought so much about her. But there was one thing, but that could certainly surprise those around her. She is not dying! Sionel decided that she had an incurable disease because of the events that happened 6 months ago. That night was no different from any other, and it all started in her room. Once inside, she could only exhale heavily, saying how tired she was. She had a lot of training that day, and she came back to the room exhausted. She didn't understand why everything was so hard today, if everything was as usual. Holding her shoulders, the girl sighed heavily and said that they hurt a lot. At that very moment, she heard a strange rustling sound behind her, so she immediately turned around and asked the stranger who he was. A voice began to laugh, telling the vice commander of the Imperial Guard that her senses were quite keen. Our heroine, standing still, could not understand what this strange feeling was. She had never felt anything like it. At that moment, an unknown energy swirling around our heroine said that she was a black dragon. Shortly after these words, she finally stopped and landed on the floor of the room. It was a black LaRoque. Our heroine asked her in bewilderment what she was doing there. In general, when did she even manage to show up? Lindell didn't even sense her presence. The girl at that moment told Lindell that she was considered the best knight in the Empire, and she came to offer a deal. With a wave of her hand, the woman asked Lindell Bodabakne to sign a contract with her. Our heroine looked around in bewilderment and asked what it meant. LaRoque told her that she had to help her. Thanks to this, her deepest desire will come true. If she has a clear goal, it will be fulfilled immediately, and this is an incomparable chance. Lindell asked, again surprised if she was telling the truth. Was it really possible to do anything? Black LaRoque smiled sweetly at the girl and said that everything was correct. She could do anything if she signed a contract with her. Of course, our heroine then decided to inquire about the conditions. After all, there is no such thing as free generosity. LaRoque said that her real body exists in this world, and she must find it and break the seal. She thought that the young genius of the Empire could do it. Lindell was surprised by the words about the body and decided to ask what was standing in front of her now. The girl said that she could not say why it was sealed. She was forced to place her soul into this temporary monobody, and this form would last for a year. During this time, she must break the seal of her real body. Born as an illegitimate daughter of a noble family, she always wanted to be recognized by her father, and then become stronger when she took up the sword. After meeting Sionel, she wanted to make him an emperor. No matter how hard you try, it's hard to do anything with someone else's feelings. Sionel became one, but Lindell never earned the recognition of her family. The man she wanted to attract never looked at her. But with the power of a dragon, was it possible? Without thinking twice, she decided to agree. Soon the contract was already signed. Our heroine wanted it so much that she made the decision without hesitation. However, she didn't want that. Coughing up blood was a side effect of adapting to the dragon's energy, but she couldn't tell anyone about it, and her body was healthy. She didn't know if the emperor would believe her, so she decided to first say that she was not sick. Lindell wanted to say something, but Sinel interrupted her and said that she would never leave him, and even death would not take her. Our heroine understood that he would not believe her. One way or another, she said that she had always been His Majesty's knight and protected him so she would not die so easily. Looking at him, she said again that she was not dying and knew her body better than he did. Coughing up blood might have surprised her, but she was still fine. Immediately after these words, the emperor took the Lindell sword and addressed the knights. He cried out and said that from that moment on, Lindell Bodabakna would lose his knighthood. She will be placed in the northern palace, and going outside is strictly prohibited. Looking at them, he told them not to even think about setting foot there without his permission. Then he looked at Lindell and said that she was forbidden to leave the palace. After that, he turned his head to the side and ordered the knights to take Lindell out of his sight. Our heroine could not understand how this could happen. As soon as they started to lift her up, the girl asked His Majesty to wait. However, the knights asked her to follow them silently. Lindell couldn't understand what the hell was going on. Were they in a cheap novel? Let us recall again, the year is 196, according to the imperial calendar, and our heroine, Lindell Bodabakna, on the day of leaving her post as a knight, faced a terrible situation. At this time, the knights had just shoved Lindell into one of the rooms and ordered her to sit still. On this day, by order of Emperor Sionel, the man she loves, she was locked in the palace. The next morning, a maid came into Lady Lindell's room and asked if she was awake. She soon apologized for the intrusion. This faithful servant was Lindell's maid, Luna, who told our heroine that she had not eaten for several days, so she advised her to have at least a little snack. However, the girl was not in the mood for food, so she asked the maid to leave the food there, and she would eat later. Luna came closer and asked the lady not to say that, because it was better to eat while everything was warm. Lindell stood her ground anyway. Luna was worried, because then the lady would definitely get worse. The girl thought to herself that nothing could go down her throat. She had been locked here for a week, even though she had done nothing. Our heroine couldn't tell the emperor everything, even though she wanted to explain that she wasn't sick, but he wouldn't give her a chance. Would he visit her if she didn't eat or drink anything? However, her plan failed, because Her Majesty the Emperor had never come to see her. Luna was very upset. At that moment, she told the lady that the chef had made duck soup because he had heard that it was Lindel's favorite dish. Was she sure she didn't want to try it? As soon as our heroine heard the combination of the words chef and soup for her, she was shocked by what this arrogant old man was cooking for her. Soon the girl began to lift the lid and tell the lady that everyone was worried about her because she had not eaten anything. Luna asked to accept the chef's sincerity and eat at least a couple of spoons. She began to play on pity, talking about how sad it would be to throw all this away. Lindell tempted herself for a long time, but still, if Luna asks so, it has been known since ancient times that knights should not make girls cry. And it is definitely not about the delicious duck soup, but about the fact that she needs to follow the knightly code. Soon she coughed and said that she could eat a little to show respect to the cook. Luna was incredibly happy to hear these words. In that case, she said that she would prepare everything for the table. Our heroine decided to remind that she did not have a strong appetite. Luna told her not to say those words because she had to eat normally at least a little. Looking at Lindell, she said that her body was already not in good shape and that it required more strength to fight off illnesses. Our heroine is already tired of thinking that she is not sick. But if she does not find Larocque's body in a year, then real problems will begin. She thought to immediately go on a search and not get stuck here. At that moment, Luna told the lady that everything would be fine, because she would always be there and she would become her strength. Looking at the maid, our heroine could not understand why she looked as if she wanted to take her apart. Her gaze was too heavy. Lindell laughed and told the maid that everything was fine, but she needed to remember just one thing: she was not sick. Luna smiled and said that she understood that completely. Because of this sarcastic answer, Lindell understood that she was not being listened to at all. But why did no one believe her, and what should she do? How to leave this place and start searching for Larocque's body? In any case, at this point, Luna set the table and wished the lady a pleasant appetite. Our heroine decided to put all her thoughts aside, thinking that first she should eat and then think about the rest. But at that very moment, the servant said that His Majesty the Emperor had come to her room. The girl put her fork down on the table, showing that she hadn't eaten anything. Just then, Sinol came up to her and addressed her. Looking at the dish, he told her in bewilderment that she hadn't even eaten a spoon. Was she really refusing to eat? Lindell was amazed. It must have happened because he came into her room. At that moment, he grabbed her by the shoulder and asked why she was doing this. Why was she now going to die of hunger? Lindell asked the Emperor what he was talking about. And why was he angry anyway? Meanwhile, the Emperor asked, does she really want to say that a former knight who can't even stand this is normal? Our heroine knocked his hand off her shoulder and reminded him again that she had said that she was not sick. Why hadn't he realized yet that this was a misunderstanding? Cyanel suddenly screamed and asked her to explain to him why she was coughing up blood right in front of his eyes. Our heroine instantly turned her gaze away. It was all because of the contract, but unfortunately, she couldn't tell about it. The guy sighed heavily and soon turned to the priest and asked him to come to the girl and help her. The man came up to her and, taking her hand, decided to measure her pulse. No matter how much you measure it, he won't understand anything. Our heroine understood that it was impossible for an ordinary person to feel a contract with a dragon. The priest, after a short silence, said that her pulse was a little unstable, but her strength had diminished. Cyanel asked what the reason was. He gave his healer a week, so it couldn't be that he hadn't found anything. Looking at the priest, the boy said that he himself should understand what would happen to him if he didn't find a cure. The man immediately fell to the ground and began screaming, asking to kill him, because he did not understand at all what the reason was. Lindell screamed in bewilderment and asked His Majesty to stop all this at once. An innocent man should not suffer because of her. The healer stood up and looked at the girl. Our heroine told him that it was not his fault, so he could rest easy. Once again, our heroine said that no matter how long she stayed here in the end, they would never find out the reason. By the way, she couldn't tell the truth, but she had to quickly change Sinol's mind to get out of here. The girl looked at the Emperor and asked him to drive her away. Cyanel sighed heavily and told her that he had given her a week to sort herself out. But he never thought that it would lead her to such useless thoughts. And looking at the healer, he said that there was no particular use for him. He would bring every healer in the empire, although he would rather search the whole world to cure her. The emperor looked at his right hand and told it not to think about any nonsense and to stay here further. However, looking at the sword holster, the girl said that her role in the palace was over. The prince she helped has already become the emperor he wanted to be. The borders of the empire are now stronger than ever. The girl also told Sinal that he controls the situation inside and outside the palace, and all the people follow him. That's why she proved to him that no one would stand in his way, so she had no reason to stay here. Unfortunately, what she said was true. She had blindly followed Cyanil since childhood because she loved him, but she only irritated him, and he could not drive her away because he considered her capable. Usually, she always followed him, but this time she decided to let go of his hand first. Cyanil does this because he is stubborn. Our heroine looked at the floor and told Cyanil that she noticed and even knew what had irritated him since childhood. Looking at the emperor, or rather at Cyanil, her love, she asked if this was what he wanted. She volunteers to leave voluntarily, so she asks to let her go. Of course, she will quickly sort out the affairs and return when the contract is fulfilled. Cyanil must distinguish to understand that However, she did not have time to finish her thought, because at that moment, Cyanil asked everyone to leave the room and leave them alone. Looking at his face, our heroine realized that today, she could even die by his hand. At that moment, Cyanil angrily ordered everyone to get lost. Once everyone left and they were alone in the room, Lindell didn't even know what to do. And how could they leave her at such a moment? She was terrified by the increasingly terrifying atmosphere. Was the emperor very angry? She couldn't die by the emperor's hand, the contract would do that. At this point, Cyanil repeated her words in bewilderment. What do you mean her role is over? She made him emperor. Looking at her, he asked if she was really going to leave him at such a moment. Lindell still thought about the fact that she asked to be sent away. Why then did he sound like he was betrayed? Our heroine initially thought that the calculation would be such that the emperor would not care about her. In her imagination, there was such an outcome that Cyanil was even happy. But the emperor suddenly asked if she was really going to leave her. Why? Was she afraid of him? Lindell looked at him in bewilderment and said that he was mistaken, because it was not so. Unexpectedly for our heroine, she saw a tear fall, and raising her head, she saw a crying Cyanil, who asked her why she wanted to run away from him so much. He told her that she should have told him right away that she was sick. She should have asked him to save her. She should have done it. Lindell was horrified to realize that she had hurt Cyanil, and he was upset with her. But what was going on? She had acted so obviously that almost the entire country knew about her feelings for him. But of course not him. Everyone knows that the emperor will never open his heart. Rather, he was pushing her away as if he wanted the master's relationship with the knights, but not with Lindell. Therefore, she expected that if he did not cling to her, she would leave. Why was he crying then? At that moment, the guy sat down on his knees and turned to our heroine. Taking her hands, he began to ask her not to leave him and to always be near Lindell, felt his hands trembling. With tears in his eyes, he continued to ask her to say as usual, with a shameless face, that she loved him. Our heroine certainly didn't really consider him a man who cleaned out his circle and became emperor. Cyanil told her to ask him for help, and that's why he wanted her to promise him to stay here. Our heroine looked away and told the emperor that this was impossible. The guy let go of his hand and asked why the girl told him only one thing. He doesn't love her. She turned her head again and told the emperor that it was not his fault, but he would definitely get into trouble if she stayed around. Once again, she reminded him, as always, that she irritated him and how he hated her, so she does not understand at all why Cyanil is doing this. Each of these words was like a blow to the most painful place. Soon the guy guiltily lowered his head down. She ended up telling everything, so she wondered if that would be enough. At that point, she decided to add something else. However, what a shock it was when, unexpectedly for her, Cyanil interrupted her with his loud laughter. Our heroine looked at him in bewilderment and couldn't understand why the hell he was laughing at all. Had he gone crazy? The guy suddenly stopped and asked if she really thought he hated her. He sighed and said that it didn't matter to him. She could blame him for everything, even curse him every day, but just not leave. He hugged her tightly again. Our heroine did not understand what was happening and wanted to tell him something, but he interrupted her and said that he would not let her go. Lindell was finally at a dead end, not understanding what was going on, and why the emperor was behaving this way. She hoped that he would easily agree, but once again he interrupted her thoughts, because at that very moment he whispered to her that he loved her. Our heroine was confused. What? Did she really hear things wrong? She didn't even know where to look. Why did Senel say that? Soon he went up to her and said that he understood that it was useless to say this now, and he knew that he could not keep her with such words. Lindell, however, at this point moved away and asked to wait, and first of all to explain who loved whom, the emperor. Her? The guy looked away, embarrassed, and said that she had heard everything correctly. It was like fireworks exploded in Lindell's head. What can I say? Congratulations! Lindell's love is no longer unrequited. It's crazy. Now she could no longer believe that the magnificent Cyanil loved her. Was that even possible? She remembered how everyone laughed at her feelings for him, but look at her now, idiots. Dreams come true. Lindell was incredibly touched and asked again if Cyanil really loved her. The guy asked in surprise if she really didn't like it so much that it made her shudder. He knew it was hard to believe such sudden words. Lindell was just thinking that she liked everything so much that she didn't even have time to assess the situation. Suddenly, the girl realized something. If the emperor's words were true, then what would happen to her wish? Literally, the reason she got into all this was because she thought Senel hated her. Cyanil suddenly told her that she could not believe his words because he himself was to blame. Our heroine nevertheless stopped him and said that she believed. However, the cool news did not end there. The emperor told her at that moment that she would soon become empress. Impera what? Our heroine was in incredible shock. What did he do? Coming closer to Lindell, he told her that she would be his empress, and that was why she would not go anywhere. He said that now she would always be by his side, and he would be by her side. Lindell thought about it. She loved Cyanil, of course, but she was still absolutely sure that he had completely lost his mind. The girl, perplexed, told him that she did not believe what he had just said. The guy nevertheless told her that everything had already been decided, but she still said that this was not it, and that His Majesty could not decide such a question alone, so the nobles would be against it. She assured him that if he made the Count's illegitimate daughter an empress, there would be no end to the scandals. This was definitely not his style of rule. Cyanil nevertheless told her with absolute confidence that he was choosing his wife, so who would dare to stop him? Lindell cried out again, but Cyanil decided to remind her that everything had already been decided, so nothing would change. Our heroine was shocked that he decided to make her not even a concubine, but an empress. She has great power, because she is the only person who is on the same level as the emperor. However, the responsibility is in keeping with such a high rank. It would be a lie to say that nobles only enjoy power and eat well. She understands well how much work lies ahead. Again, she loves Sunil, but she never thought of becoming an empress. She always wanted a comfortable life and fun. Even the life of a knight is very tiring, and he offers her to work for the empire until old age? Although no, right now that is not even important. She still needs to leave the palace and find the dragon's body to complete the contract. If she fails, she will truly die. Lindell didn't want to let that happen after this news. The girl suddenly screamed, saying that she didn't want to become empress. Cyanil, of course, was surprised by her words, but said that she still had no choice, even if she was so disgusted to be near him. Our heroine told him that she didn't mean it, but he looked at her and advised her to forget about thoughts of running away and dying alone, because he wouldn't let that happen. The girl could no longer control her emotions, because all this was rather absurd. She said again that she was not dying. The emperor sighed heavily, but soon headed for the exit, saying that the conversation was over and that she might consider him selfish, but he could not let her go. Already opening the door of the room, he turned to her and said that she would become empress even if she began to hate him. Immediately after these words, he slammed the door with all his might and left. Lindell could only fall to the ground in bewilderment from this whole conversation. Everything became even more confusing due to misunderstanding. What should she do now? If this continues, she will actually die. The girl started to get mad and beat the pillows. At that moment, some energy flew past Lindell and suggested that her plan had failed. Our heroine looked back because she heard Larocque's voice. When did she manage to come? Anyway, in response to the spirit's words, She threw a pillow at her, saying that it all started because of her. LaRoque was surprised and said that she didn't know what happened here, but throwing pillows is not worth it. Our heroine started screaming anyway and asking her to cancel the contract. LaRoque said that you can't go back on your word after the contract, but Lindell replied that it was a force majeure. After a while, LaRoque knew about everything and, perplexed, decided to ask if she understood correctly that the problem was that the Emperor loved her. Was that really so bad? The girl said that she would not be able to fulfill her part of the contract. If he remained like this, Cyanil simply would not let her out of the palace. LaRoque was surprised. She advised to escape secretly, then find the body, break the seal, and finally return. It was not that difficult, Lindell, however, said that she could not just leave. Unfortunately, there is a powerful birth barrier in the palace. Even several great wizards cannot break it. That's why if she tries to pass this barrier, there won't be any bones left of her. LaRoque was surprised again. If that was the problem, she said she could easily deal with it. Once again, Lindell decided to say that they were in the palace, so with a simple spell, such a thing would not. LaRoque sighed, saying that she always underestimated her. However, she reminded that she is a dragon, which is called the Master of Magic. A simple barrier created by humans simply cannot stop her. Our heroine decided to remind her that she couldn't even find her body. LaRoque responded by saying that the whole situation was a bit specific. Anyway, she asked to watch her carefully. One movement of the hand would be enough for her. The girl cried out happily and soon snapped her finger. As soon as nothing worked, she decided to snap it again and again and again. LaRoque didn't understand why it wasn't working and said that it couldn't be. Lindell sighed heavily and told her that she had proven the same to her. They are in the Imperial Palace, where, by the way, the blood of dragons flowed in the veins of the previous emperors. This barrier has been strengthened over generations, and that is why the work of hundreds of years cannot be destroyed just like that. Lindell added that magic cannot be used here. Only pure human magic or the divine power of priests is allowed. LaRoque screamed in confusion and asked what they should do. Then if she couldn't escape, she would be in trouble. Again, Lindell smiled and said that she had already told her about it. LaRoque said that she thought the Emperor wasn't interested in her fate at all. Lindell asked the dragon in bewilderment why she had suddenly started talking about him. Soon they started arguing. After a while, they were lying on the ground. LaRoque sighed heavily, saying that she couldn't believe she had chosen such a person. Why was she so unlucky? She suddenly told Lindell that she thought she had the willpower to live a long life, so why couldn't she convince the Emperor? She was the best knight in the Empire. Lindell thanked her for the compliment, but thought about it. It seemed that canceling the contract would not work, but time was running out, and every second and minute counted. A solution had to be found. The girl jumped up at that moment, saying that they had a contract. LaRoque asked what she was talking about. Lindell explained that the contract affects both sides. If you dig into the terms, you can always find a way out of here. There is a barrier on the palace, but she still managed to get here. If it wasn't magic, then the terms of the contract helped. LaRoque said that it was quite possible, and so our heroine immediately stood up, saying that they finally had hope it was time to look for loopholes. The girl suddenly asked if she understood correctly that for this, it was necessary to read the whole contract. In that case, she said that it was too long, so she suggested finding another solution. Our heroine was surprised and asked if it was really that difficult. There were only 13 pages. She asked to give her the contract, and she would look at everything herself. LaRoque began to hesitate suspiciously and draw out her words. Lindell asked in surprise if everything was okay. She wasn't hiding anything. The girl said that she showed her the most important part of the contract, and it's bigger. There's a little more information there. She justified it all by saying that she didn't want to tire her out, so she decided to deliver the main part. Lindell sighed heavily and asked to see the contract, and right now, LaRoque knew she had no other choice, so she instantly snapped her fingers. Immediately after the click, our heroine saw falling leaves, but she soon realized that she had definitely been deceived because the amount was much greater than it seemed at first glance. LaRoque immediately laughed and asked how many pages there were. According to her calculations, there were about 1,700. Our heroine sat down on the bed in bewilderment and asked if she had really shown her only 13 pages out of that whole pile. How could she have managed to hide 1,687 pages? LaRoque immediately reminded that she had taken out the most important part. Lindell angrily squeezed one of the documents and looked at the dragon and asked if she had any conscience at all. LaRoque, horrified, asked the girl to calm down and discuss everything normally, but soon our heroine attacked her. After a while, Lindell decided to read the documents, but there was no end to them. Why are there so many conditions? The girl asked in surprise at what point everything became so complicated. She made a mistake in signing the contract, and now everything has come to this. Either way, the fulfillment of any wish was too tempting an offer. She could break the dragon's seal and gain freedom. She could ask for anything, and she thought about getting help in winning Sionel's heart. Scratching her head, she couldn't even imagine that all this would become just a problem for her. At this point, LaRoque began to lower her hands, but our heroine looked at her angrily and ordered her to keep them raised. The girl apologized, saying that her hands hurt. Lindell asked her in bewilderment how she dared to say that when she knew what the conditions were written in the contract. Whose fault is it that she has to check so much information? No matter how much you read, there is no end in sight. She didn't even know if she would die faster from overwork or from anger at LaRoque. The dragon smiled and said that she wouldn't die. Lindell said that, while that's true, the exhaustion is still there. She's starting to think she won't be able to fulfill the terms of her contract. However, she understood that she was definitely not going to die. She would definitely find it. At that moment, her face changed. The girl began to cough loudly, and LaRoque approached her, immediately perplexed. As it turned out, the side effects showed themselves in all their glory again. They began to appear more often. Could it be because of her emotional state? LaRoque decided to ask Lindell how she was doing, but at that moment, she opened a portal. Lindell asked what it was for, to which the girl said that it was because the contract could get dirty. Our heroine nevertheless asked if it was possible to place a person in this space and then take her out of here. LaRoque said that living creatures are not allowed in there unless she wants instant death from ruptured entrails. Our heroine sighed and said that she was of no use. Soon the girl looked at her hand and asked how long this cough would last. LaRoque answered that she herself did not know. This is proof that her bodies are adapting to fulfill the desire as quickly as possible. You could say that the blood is a byproduct of the process. She would never have made a wish if she knew she would cough up blood. Now everyone in the castle thinks she's dying. By the way, she said that she even had to clean up, so that no one would see LaRoque offer to help. But our heroine replied that she could handle it herself. Looking up, she suggested that the dragon quickly sort out the contract and tidy up the room. Lindell also asked to return everything to the table as soon as she collected everything, and most importantly, that not a single page was lost. LaRoque asked if she really would read everything. Our heroine sighed heavily and said that she would have to. Did they really have another choice? LaRoque said that she understood, but how would she do it? Smiling in horror, she said that she would not sleep at night, and then somehow cope when she found something strange in him. While collecting the documents, LaRoque told her that she would definitely live a long life. Our heroine suddenly asked why the contract was appearing so calmly now. LaRoque smiled and told her that it was more effective to make this mess. Our heroine smiled and said that it was true because she almost fainted. At that moment, the knight called Lady Lindell and said that someone had come to see her. Our heroine, perplexed, said that she was not ready yet. LaRoque also said that her room was not in a very good condition. At that moment, the voice of a visitor was heard. Lindell realized in horror that it was the voice of the commander. The dragon screamed in confusion and asked what they were going to do. Lindell told her to be calm because she was thinking now. Either way, she couldn't understand why the guard commander had come so suddenly. In any case, LaRoque had to be driven out first. Just as she was about to say something, our heroine discovered that LaRoque had already run away. She was very good at throwing her away. Wait, why did she leave the papers there? Literally, anyone who came in would find that suspicious. After some thought, she decided that it would be best to hide them under the bed, because no one would look there. The voice asked Lindell what was going on, and she asked her to wait a little longer, thinking that she needed to change her clothes and put everything else away. Because of her haste, she decided to jump up, and because of this, she hit her toe with all her might on the corner of the sofa. The girl instantly fell to the ground, thinking about how her poor finger hurt. Lindell screamed to herself and hoped she hadn't broken her finger, but it still hurt like crazy. Why was this happening to her? However, She could not hold back her first scream, which is why the bewildered commander of the Shrine Empestor Guard burst into the room and asked why she was screaming. Looking around, he was in incredible shock. There was a mess everywhere, documents, a broken vase blood. What was going on? Soon he noticed Lindell lying on the floor, so he ran to her and asked what happened. Our heroine looked at him in surprise and asked why he came in. Shrine Empestor, nevertheless, began to look at the girl and was shocked by her condition. He hoped that this story would not get worse. Anyway, Lindell grabbed the guard general at that moment and told him that everything was not as he understood it. She asked him to let her explain everything. She immediately said that she had hit her foot on the bed, so she asked not to worry about her. Shrine Empestor looked at her in bewilderment and asked if she was really going to lie to him so as not to bother him. He immediately jumped up and started asking if there was anyone outside, because Lady Lindell needed a doctor. He had no idea that it was that serious. Our heroine was perplexed by everything that was happening. Does everyone here have problems with their heads? She is surrounded by crazy people who do not understand her. Soon the man looked at Lindell and asked if she was sure everything would be okay if she didn't call a doctor. Lindell smiled and said that she was fine. Nothing would change if the doctor came, and he should know about it. Shrine Empestor is known for being strict with all knights, so she is surprised by his kind side. Looking at Lindell, the guard commander did not understand how much she was destroyed, since he was talking about everything so calmly. He knew she was not like that at all. Then why is everything like this? Lindell, meanwhile, was thinking that healers would only get in her way in her situation, because then Cyanil would come here, and she wouldn't have the courage to withstand another look like that. At that moment, Shrine Empestor called Lindell again. Our heroine looked at him in surprise, asking what had happened. She was so deep in thought that she forgot he was there. Shrine suddenly lowered his head, thinking that she would not be able to put her thoughts in order. It was for this reason that he asked her to forget about it, and soon said that he had sent a knight for the maid, so she should lie down and rest. He also asked her not to worry, because he would help, so he asked her to lean on him. Lindell, perplexed, began to say that she was fine. However, he still lifted her up, and after she started limping, she said that her leg was still shaking because she had hit her toe really hard. Lindell could tell from the look in the commander's eyes that he definitely didn't believe her. He probably thought she'd treat him better if she pretended not to notice. Soon our heroine sat down on the bed. Shrine suddenly said about the blood on her clothes. He asked if it was because of the cough and how often it happens. Our heroine sighed in surprise. She had completely forgotten about it, and now it would be much more difficult to wash it off, nothing but trouble. Anyway, she said that this was the first time, and that this had never happened before, and that it all looked terrible only in appearance. For herself, she decided to dress in dark colors. Shrine Empestor, nevertheless, told her that she still thinks of others first, and herself second. It would be better to put herself first this time. Looking around, the commander realized he was too busy to notice. The room was chaos, and Lindell could only have done something like this if she had no control over her body. The man also remembered a recent conversation at the door with a knight who asked in surprise what had happened to Lindell, since she had already had even his majesty. Shrine Empestor immediately asked in surprise if the emperor had really been here before him. In that case, he wondered if the Lindell room could have become like this after his visit. He twisted his face aggressively, thinking that Cyanil was going too far. Did he really hate her that much? Lindell didn't even know what the commander was thinking, but she felt danger. She suddenly said that her room was in disarray and that it was uncomfortable to stay there, so she put things away a little. Shrine Empestor, nevertheless, asked her not to hide and to speak honestly, although he said that she might be upset if he found out that he shouldn't know. Our heroine was upset because she felt like she had lost control of the situation. Why doesn't anyone want to help her? They don't believe a single word. The girl was wondering what to do now when suddenly the commander turned to her and asked if she still loved His Majesty. Lindell smiled shyly and nodded her head. Even in this situation, she felt excited when she heard his name. Anyway, soon after she said that she wasn't the only one who felt it, Shrine Empestor looked at her in confusion and asked what she was talking about. The girl answered him that His Majesty loved her too. Even though she says this, she still can't believe it. It's like a dream. She herself was very surprised, but Sinel said it personally when he came. For herself, she understood that the long wait was worth it. Nevertheless, she asked why the commander asked about it. She was still mindful of the fact that she had a 1,700-page audit coming up, and that she had a lot of things to do when she got out. By the way, she understood that if she heard the emperor's confession after all the affairs, she would also be happy. But what happened to the atmosphere right now? Our heroine soon realized in horror that the commander was alone. Had she really touched him when she was sitting and enjoying herself? She assumed that he was very upset, but soon he turned away, completely showing his sadness. Looking at his tears, she still couldn't understand why he was reacting this way to the fulfillment of his subordinate's dream. His eyes were even bloodshot. She didn't know what to do, and Shreen thought he was the commander, so she couldn't cry. Anyway, Lindell says everything is fine. But at times like these, aren't you afraid of death? At this point, our heroine thought, why should she care about the commander's opinion? If he is jealous, then let him find a mate too. However, at that moment, the maids burst into the room and addressed Lady Lindell. Our heroine jumped in horror at first, but soon noticed that it was Luna. Her savior had arrived just in time. However, at that moment, the girl without any words fell to her knees in front of the lady and began to cry. Lindell asked in surprise why she had suddenly burst into tears. The girl was asking if she had really felt so bad that the room had turned into this. With tears in her eyes, she asked what she should do for the sake of her beloved and poor Lindell. She says that everything is fine, but how can this be true when she is covered in blood again? Our heroine started petting her and asking if she really looked that shocking. In any case, she said that it was all an exaggeration and that she was fine. Luna couldn't hold back her tears. She jumped up and asked Lady Lindell in bewilderment why she always said that she knows everything. Our heroine looked at the maid in bewilderment and asked what she was talking about. At that moment, the girl asked not to think that she was an idiot who didn't understand anything. Lindell still didn't understand what her maid meant, because all she did was sleep, eat, and fool around. Luna suddenly said that it was tiresome to see her lying around doing nothing. She even thought that Lindell was at her limit. Luna continued to say that Lindell was too lazy staring into space and not thinking about anything. She was upset because such behavior does not suit unlucky geniuses. Our heroine was surprised that she seemed so lazy. And by the way, when did they even come up with a nickname for her? Lindell was very clear that this nickname was very strange, but in any case, she asked to listen to her at least for a second. Luna screamed again and said that she knew everything, so there was no point in proving anything to her. Our heroine told her that she was most likely mistaken, but Luna took her hands and asked her to rely on her. Well, here we go again. Lindell had a brilliant plan, but in the end, it seemed like everything only got worse while she did nothing. Luna looked at Lindell for a while and thought that she would always protect her, because she would always remember her on that very day. The action is transferred to the past. Entering the room at night, the maid noticed that Lady Lindell was not sleeping, so she offered her a glass of wine if she could not sleep. Meanwhile, Lindell looked up thoughtfully and asked if she needed that glass. She didn't even know. However, Luna covered the lady, telling her that her body was already not in order, so she better sleep. Lindell answered her that she was not sick and could not be. Soon our heroine looked down and said that people always hear only what they want to hear. People don't want the truth. They want what they believe in. It was a pretty stupid decision, but she couldn't blame them. Smiling, she added that it was all her own fault. The maid told her that it was not true. She does not know why Lady Lindell says this, but everyone is worried about her. Our heroine told her that she knows that they are good people. And by the way, Luna is also good. She just didn't think that she would ever find someone who cares about her as much as Luna does. She is always grateful for that. That's why she hoped that they would have a long and happy future. Luna looked at Lady Lindell in horror and did not understand whether she was really going to die. Is that why she acts like she's going to leave soon? She endures the pain so as not to scare the people around her. Luna hoped that the lady would tell her everything. In turn, she could only tell her that she would be fine. Our heroine smiled and said that everything was right. Everything would be like that, and she would always be there. And again, the action takes us to the present. Luna could not let her mistress go so easily. She has always been kind to her, so she will be there no matter what happens. The girl suddenly said that Lindell apparently does not move because of pain and does not eat because of a sore stomach. She again pretends that everything is fine, so as not to worry her. Our heroine didn't understand what the maid was talking about. Although it was all lazy, what was she supposed to do if she was no longer a knight? And she didn't eat because healthy food was disgusting. Shrine Empestor joined in the morning and asked in horror if Lindell hadn't eaten because of her stomach ailment. Our heroine screamed and spoke directly about the disgusting taste. The guard commander stood by his opinion anyway, so he looked at Lindell in horror and asked how terrible the state of her body was. Lindell knew they didn't believe her. Luna suddenly said that she was thinking about her loved ones, and that's why she looked so devastated. Lindell, in turn, wasn't thinking about anything. The maid, meanwhile, continued to complain that Lady Lindell continued to pretend so as not to cause them trouble. No matter how much you try to explain, she came to one possible solution, and that is, chase everyone away. Our heroine apologized after a short pause and said that she wanted to be alone. That's why she asked to leave her room. After a while, our heroine finished taking a bath, and as soon as she lay down on the bed, she only thought that after bathing, you feel much better. There's nothing she can do anyway if this keeps happening. And how did it turn into this? Instead of constantly trying to correct the misunderstanding, it would be easier not to explain her condition every time. This means that the question of escape must come first. Just at that moment, the girl remembered about the contract. At that very moment, she crawled under the bed. Of course, no one noticed these papers because she hid them in a convenient place. One way or another, you need to read them from time to time. But there are only pages here, so it's hard to hope for a quick solution. She suddenly wondered if she should talk to Sunil first before leaving. She sighed heavily and said that she would do it tomorrow, but she didn't have the strength for today. First, she needed to clearly define her current state. It was also important to decide what to do next, so she decided to read the contract. Thus, the action takes us to the next morning. Having sat in one place all night, our heroine did not even know how many pages she had read, although a whole mountain remained. Stretching, she reminded herself that it wouldn't be easy to get through all 1,700 pages. In any case, it was already light outside, so it was worth going to Sunil. She would try to persuade him to let her out of the room, but her face was not in the best condition after a sleepless night. They would definitely get the wrong idea. Although she stood guard all night during national events, it did not create any problems back then. She nevertheless moved forward, thinking that the conversation could not be postponed since the issue of the future empress was at stake. Just then, Luna entered the room, apologizing prematurely for the intrusion. However, the first thing Luna said was not what she wanted. She screamed in horror and asked what those circles were. Couldn't she sleep? Lindell told her that she was a little busy. Luna screamed in horror that she didn't have to do anything. Lindell looked terrible in her opinion. Anyway, Lindell said she had something to do, so she suggested they talk about it later. Luna, confused, asked the lady where she was going. Realizing that there would be no answer, the girl decided to conduct Lindell if it was urgent. Our heroine understood that if she kept silent, she would at least be able to get out of here. Already before leaving, firstly Luna asked the lady to be careful, and our heroine was surprised by what she saw. In the early days, there were always 2 knights, as is generally accepted. But at what point did there become 3 of them? Luna whispered that His Majesty was angry about Sir Shrane Empestor's visit, so they reinforced the guards of the northern palace. There are even more knights outside, by the way. Lindell was still curious how the commander got here. It seemed he disobeyed the emperor's order. Although most of the knights respected the commander, so they decided not to interfere with him. However, at this point, the knight said that Sir Empestor was now forbidden to visit this place. The guy then decided to ask Lady Lindell how she was feeling. If everything was bad, he could call a doctor. Our heroine looked at him and said that there was no need for that. The only thing she wanted was to meet His Majesty. The guy said that although he didn't know the reason it was still impossible to do, he asked her to go back inside. Lindell nevertheless pushed him aside, asking him to get out of the way because her question was urgent. And again, the knight walked around and stood in front of her, saying that he could not let her pass, so he again asked her to go to her room. Our heroine looked at this knight's face rather with disdain. Just look at this knight. At this point, Luna decided to turn to Lady Lindell. Our heroine suddenly realized that everything was not going as she wanted. She instantly clutched her heart, thinking that if they wanted to consider her sick, then she would show them what that meant. The girl began to scream in bewilderment and talk about how her heart hurt. The knight immediately ordered the other assistants to call the doctor here. Lindell smiled slyly and still continued to talk about how her heart ached. All the supreme gods had mercy on her because the exit finally opened right in front of her. The girl instantly somersaulted over the knight and soon landed behind him. Lindell immediately started running fast, and Luna screamed in bewilderment and asked to stop her because she would run away. Our heroine looked around in bewilderment, realizing that they were all noisy. If things continued like this, she would definitely be caught. However, at this very moment, our heroine managed to crash into someone at such a crucial moment. Who is it? Lindell scratched her head in confusion and wanted to ask why the hell someone was standing in her way, but as soon as she raised her head, she noticed that this obstacle was none other than His Majesty. Of course, the first thing the Emperor asked was why Lindell was here. Our heroine didn't even know what to do. She was looking for Senel, but she got so excited as soon as she ran into him. She started saying His Majesty in embarrassment. The guy looked at her in bewilderment and asked if she was really so disgusted by pronouncing his name. The girl immediately told him that everything was completely wrong, and that was not the issue. Senel nevertheless asked the girl to answer the question of what she was doing here. At that very moment, the knights arrived, caught up with Lindell, and seeing the Emperor, began to apologize for their mistake. Our heroine understood that the knights would definitely be punished in this way, but she could not allow this. She immediately hugged Mr. Senel. The Emperor, perplexed, asked if she had just addressed him by name. The girl smiled nonetheless and said that she had been looking for him. Senel looked at her again in surprise and asked if she really wanted him to believe her words. It was even insulting because it seemed like she would be considered a liar for the rest of her days. She had somehow put her feelings in order, so she had to speak carefully. It was impossible to make it so that the innocent knights and the moon were punished. Our heroine hugged His Majesty even tighter and asked if he really didn't believe her. The aura of sincerity emanating from Lindell even melted the ice of the knights and Luna. Lindell told Senel that she wanted to see him. He left yesterday but never came back. Our heroine assumed that these words would be enough, and Senel would not tolerate such an insult. And yet she felt awkward, but wondered what Senel would say. At that moment, she raised her head and noticed the Emperor's embarrassed smile. Did he really like it? I would have thought that he could make such a facial expression. By the way, he was even more handsome up close. Suddenly the knights coughed, making it clear that they were still there. At this point, the Emperor turned to her and said that he would come more often, but asked her not to leave her room. Lindell didn't understand why he was talking, as if she was trapped in a palace. She wanted to get out of here. Our heroine told him that she didn't want to sit inside. She wanted to go outside. However, the Emperor said that she couldn't do that. Lindell asked, to which the Emperor replied that she was no longer the same as before. Our heroine, however, told him that she was absolutely no different. All this empty talk was incredibly tiring. She couldn't tell about the contract, but then what should she do? At that moment, Senel looked at Lindell and told her that she had to understand the reason. The Emperor embraced her and asked her to return to the room and not to continue the quarrel. Lindell understood that he was trying to press her feelings to convince her. In that case, she decided to do the same. She started talking about how sad and lonely she was in that room. Every day, she felt like her heart was getting worse. She thinks too much when she's alone, and she feels like the world is rejecting her when no one is around. Senel continued to hug her and listen attentively. Soon he stood up and said that it was his mistake. He turned to her and said that he had no idea that she was having these thoughts. Lindell was incredibly happy that it worked. Senel took her hand at that moment and told her that she was not alone. Soon he asked her not to worry because this would not happen again. Looking at the Emperor, she felt a bad premonition. At that very moment, Senel told her that she would move into his palace. For the future empress, he would make an exception. Our heroine was in incredible shock. She wanted to leave the room, but everything only got worse. Lindell began to say that she didn't quite mean it that way. The guy nevertheless asked her not to worry, because now she wouldn't feel lonely. Now Lindell knew she was finished. She had literally dug her own grave. If they put her in his room, it would be harder to get out of the palace. By the way, she remembered the issue with the empress, so she decided to tell Cyanil that she cannot be the empress. She explained this by the fact that she was a former knight and the illegitimate child of a count. She did not have the education of a lady since it was replaced by swordsmanship. That is why she thought that the daughter of a duke or marquis would be more suitable for the place of empress. The girl began to say that she was not suitable, but at that very moment, one of the knights asked in bewilderment what she was talking about. Lindell noticed that it was the general speaking. Where did he even come from? The man was shouting and saying that Lindell was the best fit. Only she knows about the loyalty and love with which she served His Majesty, and therefore she is his greatest treasure. All the people around also began to say that these were true words, because only Mrs. Lindell would be suitable for the role of the Empress. Who else if not her? One of the men even dared to say that they hoped that she would become their Empress. Lindell did not understand where so many nobles came from. Cyanil pointed to the nobles and knights, and told Lindell that the majority agreed with this decision, so he asked her not to say that she was not suitable for this role. Lindell wondered at this point where her doctor was. Was he really not going to say anything? Cyanil is too stubborn to give up on the idea of making her empress. If pressuring her feelings didn't help, then she'll have to move on. At that moment, the emperor took the girl's hand and told her that her hand was cold. Anyway, he said that the maids would carry her things, so she had to go. However, our heroine recoiled, saying that she could not be here. Cyanil was still puzzled, so he wanted to ask her why she was saying that. But everyone cried out in confusion, and Cyanil ran up to her. Our heroine didn't understand what was happening. Had she really overdone it when she hit Cyanil's hand? Looking at the ground, she didn't understand what that strange smell of iron was, but it soon became clear that the cause was the blood that was coming from her nose again. Everyone was screaming in horror and talking about it. People assumed she was bleeding heavily. Lindell could only think that now was not the time she had been sitting over the contract for too long at night. The girl started to justify you saying that everything is not as it seems. She did not sleep last night, so she might bleed if she is very tired. She started spinning and telling them not to worry, and soon decided to get back to what they were talking about. Right! The Empress! People, however, were not going to continue this conversation, so everyone immediately started calling for the doctor. Lindell shouted after them, asking them to listen to her. She was perfectly fine, as she had already said. At that very moment, Cyanil took our heroine in his arms and asked her to calm down. The girl raised her head and began to ask Cyanil to lower her to the ground. However, the emperor asked her to be quiet and just hold on to her. He assured her that everything would be fine. All the while, Lindell's blood was pouring onto the carpet. Lindell tried to say something, but the emperor continued to say that everything would be fine. He promised her that. As a result, after some time, she was lying in Cyanil's bedroom. Our heroine had no idea that they would go so far. No matter how much you explain to people, they still act as if she is a patient. Lindell went back to Cyanil and said she was fine. She also assumed that he had a lot of other things to do, so Cyanil suddenly interrupted her and asked her not to worry because the healer would come soon. All the maids were puzzled and saddened by the fact that Mrs. Lindell in such a situation thought first of His Majesty Lindell, however only tried to drive him away. Anyway, the girls whispered to each other what they should do to make her feel better. They agreed that it was best to wait for the healer. Just at that very moment, a healer ran into the room, walking towards Lindell in horror, saying that he would immediately activate the restoration spell. Within a moment, he took her hand and began to whisper a spell to himself to help Lindell. Our heroine sighed heavily because she understood that no matter how many times he read this spell, she was still not sick. Soon she stood up and asked the healer to take a rest, since this would probably have to be done immediately after arriving. The man leaned over anyway, saying that he was flattered that she was thinking about him in her condition, but she shouldn't worry. She was suffering because of his incompetence. How could she relax? Cyanil had been nervously biting his finger the whole time, but soon asked the healer what Lindell's condition was. The man told the emperor that he most likely had nothing to worry about, as some of the small veins had weakened due to fatigue. He explained that she would recover when she had a good rest. At that moment, Cyanil sat down opposite Lindell with a near crash. He didn't understand why she was going to go outside after she started bleeding from the slightest movement. Cyanil assumed that she had not slept all night. Maybe she felt some discomfort? Lindell told him that it was not that at all. She turned her head away in embarrassment and said she had been having trouble sleeping. Of course, she couldn't tell me she had been reading the swindler's contract all night. Cyanil, breathing heavily, asked if it was true. Our heroine looked at him with pity on her face. At this point, the healer asked the girl if she had attacks of pain, or what about shortness of breath. The girl answered him that there was no pain in principle, but she was out of breath because she had eaten little. He asked if she had lost her appetite. Did she often feel dizzy? Did she feel tired? Or maybe her back was tense and her legs were weak. Lindell told him it was true, she wasn't feeling well after vomiting blood, but wasn't the rest natural when you lay around all day? She couldn't understand why he was asking this. When suddenly, the man said that he understood everything, Cyanil jumped up and asked what he understood. Rising from his seat, he said that he thought he had found the answer to the question of what Mrs. Lindell was ill with. Our heroine did not understand what he was talking about. At that moment, the healer said that she most likely had a soul distortion. To say that our heroine was in shock is to say nothing. What does this even mean? He sighed heavily and said that he couldn't even believe that something like this had happened to her. And what should they do? Lindell was in shock because they believed him. She knew that any normal person would say that this was just a plot from an old-fashioned novel. Nevertheless, Cyanil asked what it meant. The healer replied that he would explain everything now Mrs. Lindell had not suffered any serious injuries recently, nor had she been poisoned. That's why he focused on things that take a long time to show symptoms. He searched for information in countless books. He was still able to find a disease whose symptoms matched. At first, it was hard to believe, but now he was convinced. Again, he sighed heavily and told the lady that she had a distortion of the soul. Lindell only said to herself that the only thing that was distorted was his head. Cyanil clenched his fist and asked the healer why he decided so. The man answered him that it was a curse. It was she who showed the symptoms of a person who had long been cursed. Our heroine was incredibly surprised. Her body is being rebuilt to fulfill her desires. It is a process that occurs independently of the body's owner. In a way, it is truly a curse. She looked at the healer and asked herself if he had guessed what was happening to her. Although he claimed that the curse had been on her for a long time, but the contract was concluded recently. Our heroine at this point became a little overly excited and said out loud that it was not that long ago. Silence fell in the room. The girl instantly realized that she had accidentally said all this out loud. The healer immediately assumed that Lindell knew the truth. Our heroine, perplexed, asked what he was talking about. The man replied that she had reacted distantly, as if she knew what was happening to her. She knew she was cursed and knew what it would lead to. Cyanil, at that moment, screamed in bewilderment and asked Lindell why she hadn't told him. The healer began to cry and say that she simply could not say it. Lindell was in shock, and looking at the tears of this charlatan, she wanted to shut his mouth. Looking at Cyanil, the man said that the curse was most likely intended for His Majesty. Most likely the culprit tried to curse him, even in the time before the coronation. Our heroine completely lost touch with what he was saying. How could the curse be aimed at Cyanil? The man reminded Cyanil that he spent a lot of time with Lindell when he was 15. He assumed the boy had felt discomfort or pain that soon disappeared after their first meeting. Cyanil, horrified, said that was true. In that case, the man said that everything was as expected. She had taken away his curse back then. The man began to cry, just like Luna and the other maids. Soon he asked how long she had been protecting His Majesty. Lindell was confused. None of this was true. The cough had nothing to do with Cyanil. So why was he taking this nonsense from his grandfather seriously? At that very moment, the emperor fell to his knees and began to laugh loudly. Lindell was very surprised. She immediately asked him if everything was okay. Cyanil kept his eyes closed and soon told her that everything was clear to him now. He remembers that she always told him that he had a lot of enemies, but even then she told him and promised to protect him at any cost. Lindell said this with a smile on her face. However, recently she started saying that there were no enemies left, so her role here was over. Could that be what she meant? Clutching his heart, he asked if she was really going to disappear, taking his curses with her. Did she really think he would be grateful if she died instead of him? Lindell was in incredible shock. She said in horror that it was not so. She did not understand what to do and why Sinel immediately decided that it was true. Sionel at this time was perplexedly asking himself who could have done this. Our heroine in turn did not understand why he reacted so sharply to the curse. At this moment, the healer turned to His Majesty and asked if there were any sorcerers near the previous empress. And let's immediately remember how it all happened. We are talking about the Dowager Empress, the wife of the previous emperor. Sionel was not even born from a concubine, but from a common maid. She hated him to death. This woman constantly interfered with him, sent assassins, did many bad things. She even used any methods to kill Sionel. Somehow, she kept the witch by her side, who took care of her. The healer wanted to say that she took on herself the curse that the witch tried to cast on Sionel. However, she immediately wondered whether she had died at the hands of the emperor. Sionel at this point said that he killed the empress and the sorceress with his own hands. Then why didn't the curse disappear? If it was completed, it wouldn't disappear so easily, even after the spell died. The target was His Majesty. The curse must be strong, and that's probably why it didn't disappear. Sionel then said that if they found the culprit, then they can find a method of treatment. How can they help her? What can they do? The man looked at the emperor and told him that there was only one way: they needed to find a dark healer. The emperor looked at the healer in bewilderment and asked what dark healer they were talking about. The man said that beyond the southern sea, there was a man who could control souls. Perhaps he could return a distorted soul to its normal state. He found only this solution. The dark healer can save Mrs. Lindelay. Soon after the doctor left Lindell's room, rumors began to spread throughout the empire. The girl who fell in love with the young prince at first sight swore allegiance to him and took the curse to protect him and is now dying from it. It's funny, this is how the story of the knight who sacrificed himself for the emperor came about. It was twisted and romanticized, which led to it spreading even more around the country. Even Luna talked about these rumors. The knights nearby were crying when suddenly one of them asked Lindell if she was listening to them. The girl came to her senses and said that she was listening. Utilia suddenly suggested that they look at the flowering trees together and eat her favorite dishes when she became healthy again. Roselle in turn asked what they could do for Lindell, and Pan asked her to calm down. Lindell herself realized that there were so many things to think about that she was going crazy. The girl soon said that she was completely fine. However, Utilia asked her not to pretend, because everyone already knows the truth. Why does she continue to insist on her own? The girls asked if she knew how surprised they were when they heard about her condition. Lindell looked down guiltily and apologized to the girls. Pan suddenly said that according to rumors, His Majesty takes good care of her. They thought it would be cool if she could overcome the curse with the power of love. As soon as she heard the words about Sinel, she even became a little embarrassed, but his concern had a downside. He takes such good care of her that it has become a problem. 5 days have passed since the healer's delirious story. After this story, the emperor treats her differently. He thinks that she can break down at any moment. She was even so bored staying in the room that she even called her friends. Pan at this point asked in surprise if they could even be in this bedroom. She then added that the room looked like a newlywed's room. Lindell screamed in disbelief and said that it was all a lie. Roselle, nevertheless, began to congratulate her friend because they had heard that she would be empress. Utilia was surprised that her efforts and love had reached Sionelhe. In any case, they were glad that she could become happy, so they asked her not to worry about little things and just get better, and she could also call them if she felt bad. Pan at that moment said that His Majesty is doing everything to find the dark healer. Many knights went to search. They will turn the whole empire upside down for sure. Lindell was surprised that even the guards had left. The palace could not be left unattended, because there would be no one to protect His Majesty. The girls turned to her and said that she seemed not to understand the seriousness of the situation. It was a question of the health and life of the Empress, the mother of the country. Even the commander of the Shreen Impester, Guard himself, led one of the search parties. Pan asked her friend to stop thinking about others and finally focus on herself. Lindell apologized and said that she was already thinking about herself. She suggested that it would be better to wait for the dark healer to clear up the misunderstanding. Suddenly, Roselle came closer to Lindell and asked her how she could notice the emperor's curse. Pan and Utilia said they were also interested. Lindell was perplexed and said that there was no curse because it was all complete nonsense. She came to the palace at the age of 15, and such a child simply could not notice the curse. Roselle asked in horror if this was all a lie. Lindell asked in surprise what she thought about it. Utilia, however, said that she was the emperor's personal knight, so she couldn't be told the secret. Pan even felt sad that she was hiding it from them. Lindell screamed in disbelief and said that if they weren't going to believe her, they didn't have to ask. At that moment, Luna walked into the room and asked if she needed anything. The maid, in turn, noticed a very interesting picture. Lindell screamed in anger and ordered everyone to get out of her room. As soon as she noticed her faithful servant, her face instantly changed, and she said that she had come just in time. Since there were 3 knights who were bothering her, she asked them to be driven away. Within a moment, Panrosel and Utilia were standing outside the door. Utilia sank to the ground, saying that Lindell was pretending, but the video showed her terrible condition. It was impossible to believe that she was okay. Lindell often missed attacks that she could easily dodge. Before, it was as if she felt pain. Lindell, who had always been ahead of them in everything, had changed so abruptly. They were the closest, but they didn't notice anything. Roselle continued to cry and ask what they would do if she died. Utilia screamed in confusion and asked them not to talk nonsense. Even she started to cry at that moment, but she still said that Lindell would never die. The action moves to the evening of the same day. Our heroine was still lying on the bed at this time, and Cyanil was looking at documents. He suddenly assumed that she couldn't sleep. Was it really the same? Apparently, she was tired of constantly meeting guests. If something is wrong, he asked to speak up immediately, as soon as there are problems, and not to hide anything from him. He also asked not to bear the burden alone. Our heroine said that she was offended that he came every evening just to work. She would like to spend more time with him. As soon as he heard the words about a possible breakup, he said that it was nonsense, it would never happen, because he would cure her. Our heroine realized that she had started complaining without even realizing it, but perhaps she had gotten used to being around him. Either way, she said that she had not been sick from the very beginning. She suddenly said that she heard that Cyanil was looking for the Dark Healer. Did he really even send the commander of the guard to search for him? Cyanil assumed that her visitors had told her this. He said it was true anyway, because no one could do it better than the guards. They are responsible for her safety anyway, so sending them away for such trifles is wrong. She may not have many enemies now, but he asked if she was really that worried about him. Our heroine was surprised by this question. Lindell soon told him that it was natural, since she was a knight of the emperor and vice commander of the guard. Yet at that moment, he hovered over her and asked if that was the only reason she loved him. Didn't she? Cyanil smiled sarcastically because he knew her answer and also knew about his feelings for her. Our heroine was incredibly confused. She didn't know what to do. They were always together, but now the atmosphere was completely different. Her heart kept pounding loudly. Anyway, she couldn't help herself and told Cyanil that he was right. He was very handsome. Soon, he lay down next to her and said that there were plenty of good-looking people in the imperial family. Lindell, in turn, said that he was the best, and no one could compare with him. He said he didn't even know whether he liked it or not. He asked if he understood correctly that she was only attracted to his appearance. The girl said that she was the illegitimate daughter of a count, so she thought they looked alike. At first, she thought that was why she couldn't take her eyes off him. However, at some point, she began to have completely different feelings. She doesn't know the reason for this. She explained it by saying that she simply loves him. The girl then asked Cyanil why he fell in love with her, to which he smiled and said that it was a very good question. Lindell asked in bewilderment, was he really not going to tell? How cruel! After all, he had forced her to tell everything. She sighed heavily and said it didn't matter. As they say, if you love first, you lose. She would sleep since he wasn't going to talk because she was tired. However, at that moment, Cyanil began to reach out to her and think that she still did not understand anything. In this life or any other, he would always love her first. The action moves forward some time. Our heroine understood that everyone in the imperial palace was busy with something. When everyone around her is working, she even begins to think that she has plenty of time, although she is also busy in her own way. No matter how much you read the contract, there is no end to it. What's more important is that Larocque says nothing at all after appearing. Did something happen? The girl at that moment turned to Lindell and told her that she would be gone for a while. Our heroine immediately stood up and asked what this meant. What was the reason for this? Why so suddenly? Where to? And what would they do with the loopholes? Larocque told her that she had urgent business and she didn't want to leave her, but it was important. Still, our heroine was perplexed and asked where she was going to go alone with an incomplete body. After all, she herself said that it was created from mana. Larocque told her that she was still a dragon, even if she appeared in front of Lindell in that form. That's why she said that wasn't the problem. Lindell apologized and said she was worried about her. The girl said that she understood the intentions of her words, so she asked not to apologize. In fact, it was her fault that she was leaving her, because they had little time anyway. Lindell also noted that there really wasn't much time. She didn't know what had happened to her, but was it really that important to leave at such a moment? Our heroine signed a contract and promised to find the body to remove the seal. Half a year of searching in the Empire did not bring any results, so other countries remained. Lindell, however, I didn't think she would be locked in the palace, and they only have half a year. At this rate, if she doesn't fulfill the contract, she'll just die. She also decided to remind them that Larocque's shell would run out of power and would disappear immediately. Couldn't they leave after they found a chance to get out of the palace? The girl apologized and said that it was necessary to do it now. She could not reveal the reason, but she wanted to check one thing, and soon after that, she would return. Lindell sighed heavily, but still accepted her words, so if it was that important, then she could go. At that very moment, Larocque looked at our heroine in bewilderment and asked if she really could go. Lindell told her she wasn't going on her last journey, so yes, she could go. And anyway, why ask her if Larocque made it clear she was going to go anyway? Larocque asked in surprise, what if she was late or didn't come back? Our heroine thought about it, but soon said that then there would be only one option. They will die together, and soon they will walk hand in hand into the afterlife. The girl sighed and said that she sometimes forgets what kind of person Lindell is. One way or another, our heroine still told her that she would return. Larocque asked if she believed her. Our heroine asked in surprise who else she could trust if not her. In that case, Larocque decided that she had to return. Soon she thanked her for her understanding and promised that she would definitely do it. Our heroine told her to act faster, and she would look for ways to escape. At that moment, Larocque snapped her fingers and said that while she was not here, she would give her one thing. Showing her the bottle, she said it was Estelle, a precious medicine that only the dragon race could make. It should be drunk if there was any problem. Our heroine asked in surprise if she really meant by these words that the side effects would get worse. Larocque said she only gives it as a just-in-case treatment. Lindell then asked to clarify for what problems it should be taken. The girl said that she needed to think a little, and soon she smiled and said that she needed to take the medicine when it seemed as if she was dying. Our heroine was in incredible shock. The dragon in turn began to laugh and say that she was joking. If she feels strong changes because of the contract, for example bleeding, then she needs to drink it, and it will balance all the processes in the body. Lindell asked why she hadn't given it to her, before Larocque explained that it was difficult to make. Since it was sealed, she had to ask a friend to help her make it. Our heroine decided in any case that if it was so valuable, it would be better to drink it right away. However, Larocque began to stop her. She was perplexed and said that this was a dragon medicine that could cause side effects in humans. In that case, Lindell asked why she should give it to her. Larocque sighed and said that she had warned her to only drink it for emergencies. Lindell suggested that in that case they would have to drink when something serious happened. Larocque stood up, saying that she hoped that would not happen. Soon after, she opened the window and said that she was going. However, she decided to say one last thing. Smiling, she said confidentially that it would be okay if the contract was a little delayed. Lindell recalled that she told her that she would die if they did not complete the contract on time. The girl said that this was motivation not to waste time. Lindell screamed, saying that she was cheating on her for the umpteenth time. However, Larocque jumped down and said that they would see each other later. Our heroine only screamed in bewilderment at the end and said that she was a fraud. Soon, several days have passed since Laroque left. Our heroine still hasn't figured out how to find her body. What's the best thing to do? At that very moment, Lindell was pulled out of her thoughts by her faithful servant Luna. Our heroine came to her senses instantly and asked what they were talking about. The girl said that they were talking about founding an empire. The sky is clear, which means that on the night of Ursula, the stars will be more visible. Lindell sighed and said she remembered. However, what really bothered her was that Laroque had left in a temporary body. Although then, she wondered if she should even worry about this swindler. She was the kind of person who would always be okay. The more she thinks about it, the angrier she gets. All these hardships she went through. Luna suddenly asked the lady if she was in any pain. Our heroine, with incredible anger on her face, said that nothing hurts. Luna, horrified, said that everything is written on her face, so she calls a healer. Lindell's face immediately changed because there was no need to call him. She was just a little tired. Another meeting like this, and she would have diseases that she had not had before. However, at that very moment, Luna began to cry because her mistress was tired of doing nothing and lying down. Our heroine at such moments could not really understand whether Luna loved her or hated her. One way or another, the girl said that she needed to meet with a healer. Soon she asked not to worry about him, because her body was more important. With the speed of light, she headed towards the door, and our heroine did not have time to say anything. Scratching her head, the girl decided that now was not the time to worry about Laroque. It was much better to take care of herself. A moment later, the healer burst into the room, asking Lady Lindell what was hurting her. Meanwhile, Luna and the maids were in tears. Our heroine didn't understand how he had appeared so quickly, because Luna had just left. Anyway, she said that there was no need for him to come. He asked her how her head was. The girl, perplexed, said, for the 100th time, that she was completely fine. The man asked her not to worry, because she was so worried about him, so he would help her even at the cost of his existence. And again, the man asked how her head was. Our heroine, in turn, thought that she would need to talk to Cyanel about him, immediately changing the healer to another one upon arrival. The man looked at Lady Lindell and asked her not to hide the pain so that he could find a solution. The girl continued to say that she was not sick and that Luna had thrown a tantrum for no reason. The healer asked in surprise if she was sure that nothing was hurting. He suddenly suggested that she might simply not feel pain. Our heroine looked at him in bewilderment and asked what he had just said. The man said that he doubted that she was capable of feeling pain because she always said that she was not in pain. Soon he turned around and, with tears in his eyes, said that now everything was clear to him. Lindell, perplexed, told them to wait because she hadn't said anything yet. The maid approached the healer and asked if he really meant to say that. The man interrupted her and said that, seriously, ill people sometimes feel too much pain. He has even encountered cases where patients stop feeling pain altogether because signals are sent to the brain that are uncontrollably blocked. The soul distortion is necessarily accompanied by severe pain. The curse has spread significantly, so he believes that Lindell has achieved this. He assured her that she didn't understand it, because she thought everything was fine. Luna also began to say that she now understood why Lindell said she was healthy. Lindell held back the last of her nervous system cells so as not to tear this old fox to shreds. In any case, she would not let this go so easily. Taking the girl's hand, he told her that they shouldn't shake like that. She might not feel it, but that was further proof that he was right. The girl screamed loudly and asked how long he would continue to talk this nonsense. She shouted and proudly said that she was a knight. She was the vice commander of the Emperor's elite guard. She certainly understands her own body much better than others. Or do they think she's lying? The man, perplexed, began to tell Lady Lindell that he did not mean to say that she was lying. He simply wanted her to. In that case, she told him to believe he literally doesn't believe anything she tells him. She decided to suggest that in order to check whether she felt pain or not, it would be enough to simply apply force to her body to understand this. The healer asked in bewilderment how he could harm the future empress. The maid also asked Lady Lindell to come to her senses. Our heroine, in turn, said that she is still a Bodbachna, not an empress. All this is just a healing process, and the responsibility will be hers alone. The man sat down on his knees, and even reluctantly, nevertheless, agreed with Lindell's words. He took her hand and said that he would hold them and squeeze them. If she felt pain, she should immediately say so. With the eyes of a hawk, she looked at him, thinking that this old man had only made the misunderstanding worse with his arguments, so she would get rid of everything in one go. At that moment, the man said that he was right. He knew it. Could it be that she couldn't see it now? He showed her that he was pressing with all his might, and she didn't even say a word to him. Our heroine asked in bewilderment what he was talking about. What did he mean by he was pressing? Looking at him, she noticed that he was shaking all over from the tension. Lindell was shocked. Was he a chick or something? Even he would have been stronger. You could tell right away that he was a man who had never held a sword in his hands. The girl screamed and told him not to joke, but to finally start squeezing properly. The man, perplexed, told Lady Lindell that he was already trying. The maid almost fainted at that moment. How could this be? The healer's words were true. Our heroine sighed heavily and still insisted that it was all a lie. Pointing at the man, she said that he had a grip like a chick. The man asked her to stop being hysterical and just acknowledge his words. If she continues to be angry, it will only get worse. Lindell became more and more aggressive. With each word he said, Luna began to calm the lady down. But our heroine asked to let her go so she could just talk. The healer said that he didn't think they had much time left given her condition, so they needed to find a dark healer quickly. Luna asked our heroine to calm down, because she would get worse if she continued to be angry. Lindell thought that she would be angry. She just didn't understand why all this was happening. Soon after that, the girl jumped up and ran as fast as she could from this madhouse. Everyone was starting to irritate her too much. A few seconds later, she was already running along the corridors of the palace, and knights were shouting after her and asking her to stop. Lindell continued to run as fast as she could and showed no signs of stopping, so she advised the knights not to run after her and to just leave her alone. After some time, the girl was able to break away and hide behind a column to catch her breath. Sitting on the floor, she was in shock. It was crazy. She didn't even really want to run away, but this atmosphere was driving her crazy. She immediately thought about it. Would Sinel be informed about this? What should she do now? She wouldn't be able to leave the palace anyway. Lindell decided she needed to come up with an excuse if she had to go back. At that moment, someone approached her and said, surprised, that he knew her. The fair-haired guy looked at Lindell in bewilderment and asked why she was here. The girl, by the way, was also surprised that she met a young gentleman here. This guy is the Minister of Foreign Affairs, a man from the Emperor's faction, and her half-brother. She certainly didn't want to meet him in a situation like this. The blonde guy's name was Askal. However, our heroine did not understand where he came from, because he should be in another country. At that moment, Askal also asked why she was here. Judging by her appearance, he assumed that she had run away. What was going on? Our heroine immediately noticed the cold, unfeeling speech. It's hard to call the two of them brother and sister, because in essence they are connected only by their last name. His eyes reflect only that with such a look, she is disgracing the family. Even if Sinel wants to make her empress, it does not change the fact that she is still an illegitimate daughter. Tomorrow, rumors will spread around the palace that the future empress is running around the palace like a madwoman. This will be a scandal for her family and another nuisance for him. Making excuses would only make things worse, so it was better to end things with an apology. That's why she looked at him and apologized. Askal said that she usually didn't run away so easily. Apparently, she was really having a hard time. In any case, he decided not to ask her any questions. Soon after, he put his arm around his sister and asked her to stop sitting on the cold floor and instead lean on him. He pulled her to her feet and asked her to shift the load onto him so that her legs wouldn't get tired. Lindell, perplexed, began to apologize. Askal told his sister that there was no need to apologize so much. If the emperor found out about this, he would be worried. Then, he said that the family, and even the father, are also looking for the dark healer. So many resources have been invested that they cannot fail to find him. Lindell couldn't believe that the count, or rather her father, a man who didn't care about her, had suddenly decided to help with the search. Askal, still without emotion, said that everything was so he asked her not to worry, but rather to focus on recovery. Our heroine was very surprised that even he was worried about her. But why? At this point, the guy said that their conversation had gone on too long, so he offered to go and take her back. Lindell couldn't bear to let him take her away, so she said she could go herself. Anyway, Askell told her that there was no reason to refuse, so he asked her to stop being stubborn when her body was in such a state. And who wouldn't in that situation? It would look like she ran away and caused trouble, and he caught her and brought her back. She was sure that if she went with him, she would be disgraced. A civil servant had caught the vice commander of the guard. It would have been better if she had crawled herself. The girl nevertheless decided that she had to refuse this offer, and if it didn't work out, she would run away. At that moment, for some reason, her head began to spin. But she had to go. A moment later, she fell to the ground, and Askell caught her, and perplexed, began to ask what had happened. Soon, he tried for a long time to wake her up by shouting her name and shaking her from side to side. After some time, our heroine finally began to come to her senses, but she did not really understand what kind of place this was. In front of her, she saw Larocque and Cionel. At that moment, the girl asked His Majesty why he was so impudent, because if you think about it, she was his ancestor. The guy said that she was talking bullshit again. Now was definitely not the time for such nonsense. However, Askell sighed and asked the two of them to calm down. Lindell didn't understand whether this was a dream or reality. Even her brother was here. She didn't understand why they were all gathered in this place, and what was even stranger was that this unfamiliar child was standing next to hers. However, at this moment, Askell was talking about his sister being in a bad condition. But unexpectedly for himself, he noticed that she had already come to her senses. After these words, the emperor approached her and ordered the boy to step aside. Askell also joined in and said that he would also ask to move away from his sister, since she was awake. At that very moment, the guy ran up to the girl and said that they had been making fun of him all this time. Lindell, perplexed, told Cionel that it was a child, so there was no need to press him. The emperor, surprised, asked who had said it was a child. Our heroine looked at him in surprise and said that everything seemed clear, wasn't it? The emperor sighed heavily, asking her how she could have seen such a thing. And again, he advised the boy to move away from Lindell. The girl, however, only looked at Cionel and thought that she had not seen him so irritated for a long time. At that very moment, an interesting thought came into her head. What if he was just jealous? She immediately decided that it was true. He was jealous of her, even for a small child, which meant that Cionel had a sweet side. The emperor turned to the girl and asked her to look again, and more carefully. Did she really think it was a child? Our heroine still didn't understand what he was talking about. Looking at the guy, she said that no matter how you look at him, For a moment, she screamed in surprise, asking them where this boar came from. The guy asked Lindell in surprise, did she really not know him? At that moment, the guy just smiled and started saying who it was. At the same time, an unknown voice was addressing her, asking her to wake up. Lindell looked at him and asked what he had just said. She had definitely heard a voice. The stranger continued to ask Lindell to wake up. The guy snorted at this point, saying how annoying it was. However, the voice did not stop. The guy sighed heavily at that moment and said that apparently nothing could be done, so she better go because he was calling her. Lindell did not understand what this meant. He calmly answered you that they would still see each other again, even if she didn't want to. That's why he told her to go well, and they would see each other later. At that moment, a bright light appeared in front of Lindell. After some time, her eyes opened, and in front of her, she saw a frightened Cionel who was calling her. Our heroine asked in surprise if it was him. The emperor touched her face and said that it was him. He was here. Lindell did not understand why his hands were shaking so much, and in general, she looked around and could not understand where the person who was here had gone. When did so many people manage to gather around? The girl looked at the emperor and asked what this place was. Cionel took her hand and said that this was the Ryut Temple. Our heroine was in incredible shock. She immediately remembered that Rote is the god of the dead. Again, she didn't understand why she was here. But from her last memories, she remembered talking to Askell's brother, Cionel the dragon, the man in black, who pretended to be a child. Was it all a dream? It seems she lost consciousness, so she was brought here for treatment. Somehow, she didn't understand why they came here, and not to the temple of Ursula, the god of life. Most of the healers who performed the treatments came from there. Our heroine looked at the emperor and asked him why they were here. He immediately looked down guiltily. He soon told her that it was because she had stopped breathing. Lindell, puzzled, asked what that meant. She couldn't believe it, and thought that it simply couldn't be. The priests at that moment told her that her soul had just recently found peace. Lindell started screaming in anger, asking why they were talking about some soul again. Did that healer Rook come up with something again? The emperor said that this was not so because the healer could do nothing more for her. In that case, she asked who had spoken this nonsense. She wanted to know who did it, and then she would set his mind straight. At that moment, Cyanil hugged her and asked her to calm down. Lindell talked about how she couldn't believe everything that was happening. She understood when he was worried, when she caught her breath. But coming to the Lute Temple for a stupid reason was too much. Cyanil pulled away from her in disbelief and told her that her so-called "for a while" had turned into 3 days. She hadn't breathed for about 3 days. Our heroine was horrified that all this did not last a few seconds. At that time, the emperor asked her what else he could do. With tears in his eyes, he asked if she was really suggesting that he do nothing when she had even stopped breathing. Our heroine was in incredible shock. She could not understand how it was possible not to breathe for 3 days. She immediately assumed that she was not at the root temple to come back to life. At that moment, Lindell asked Cyanil in surprise if she understood correctly that today was her funeral, and that was why everyone had gathered. Cyanil immediately told her to repeat what she had said. The girl apologized, saying that she had misspoke. He told her not to say such a thing, even in jest. Lindell agreed with him and asked for forgiveness. At that very moment, a joyful man entered the room, saying that she had finally woken up. The girl did not understand who it was, but from the reaction of the priests and from Cyanil's look, it was clear that they were not at all happy to see him. Grabbing Lindell, he told her that the reward for this deed would be given in full. The boy bowed, repeating his words. Just think, a reward from the emperor. What happiness to be honored with such an honor. Soon after, the boy turned to His Majesty and reminded him that he had revived her. That's why he asked in surprise why he had such a cold reaction to him. Cyanil shouted angrily and ordered him to stop talking nonsense. Lindell assumed that they were probably afraid of her. The guy shrugged his shoulders in surprise and asked if he had made some kind of mistake. The emperor told him that he would stay there despite his absurd behavior because he had saved his woman. One way or another, he told him not to even dream about a second time. He would not forgive any more disrespect. Lindell was surprised that the man had saved her. Looking at this guy, she assumed that he was the dark healer. At this point, even he said that he had gone a little too far. He also took a step towards the emperor and said that he understood that he was not happy about this, but still, did he not need his help? No one knows when she will get worse again. The emperor said that the order could change. If she died first, he would go after her, so he ordered to correct the insolent attitude if he wanted to live. The boy grabbed his neck in horror, saying how scared he was. Why was the emperor so cruel? Anyway, he told Cyanil that he was surrounded by only stupid priests, which is why they came to him. Our heroine looked at him and didn't understand what was going on, but she knew one thing for sure. This guy is crazy since he behaves so brazenly with Cyanil. At this point, he sat down next to Lady Lindell, saying that he had never gotten around to introducing himself. The guy immediately pulled off his hood after these words, saying that he was Lute's servant, Melaine Crostan. Lindell, although she could smell the madness, still decided that she owed him a debt of gratitude. She sheepishly said that she was grateful for his rescue. Still, she thought about it. Servant Lute. Usually priests say that although it seemed to her that only healers could heal. Lindell asked if he had healed her to revive her. The guy said that he, like other priests, could not use such power. It was the lot of healers. In that case, she assumed that the dark healer was another person. Melaine sighed and said that it was true. He was not the person she was looking for. However, at that moment, Cyanil looked at Melaine and said only one word to him, "Hood." The guy asked what it was for, to which Cyanil replied that if he didn't want to die, he'd better quickly put it back on and not show his face in front of Lindell. The guy smiled and said that if His Majesty the Emperor said so, then he agreed. Lindell, in turn, decided that she needed to defuse the situation. The girl suggested that the priest had saved her. Cyanil told her that she had stopped breathing, so they didn't have time to wait for the dark healer. Unfortunately, the healers in the palace were also powerless, and he thought it would be better to borrow the power of Lute, which was closely connected to the soul. When he came here, he saw this man. a man who had abilities similar to the Dark Healer, and they suited her case. Our heroine asked in surprise what this meant. So from the words of the Emperor, Melaine can touch her soul? The boy smiled and said that the power of God that he possessed could hold the soul. It was brought here when both the soul and the body were separated, so it stopped breathing. Our heroine, however, did not understand how this could happen. At that very moment, she thought, the problem Larocque was talking about was probably related to this an urgent situation with a threat of death. Our heroine was angry. She should have expressed herself more precisely. How can she drink medicine if she can't breathe? Anyway, Melaine got to his feet and told her that the only thing that mattered was that she was alive now. However, her soul had not returned completely, so she could not relax. Leaning towards her, he said that it would be better to use his powers again since she was awake. In that case, he said that everyone except Lady Lindell should leave the room. Cyanil looked at the boy and said that he hoped that he would not do anything stupid. Lindell asked Cyanil in bewilderment if he would really leave her here. The guy said that he would wait for her outside, and he would come if something happened, so she didn't have to worry. After a while, everyone left the room. Melaine assumed that His Majesty valued her more than he thought. There was nothing he could do anyway when her life was at stake. Lindell asked him to stop talking nonsense and start treatment as soon as possible. The girl thought that she couldn't give in to this guy's manipulation, so she would pretend that everything was fine. However, at that moment, Melaine took off his hood and asked Lindell how the Emperor would react if he found out that his darling was not human at all. Our heroine, perplexed, asked why he suddenly started talking like that, but unexpectedly for her, he grabbed her by the neck. Melaine looked at her in surprise and asked if she was still pretending not to know anything. Lindell asked in horror what kind of nonsense he was talking about, to which the guy replied that an ordinary person could not survive after the separation of the soul. Still holding her by the neck, he told her that she had lasted 3 days, even though her soul was not here. It was impossible. The girl felt like she was starting to run out of air. But at that moment, Melaine said something even more shocking. The guy looked at her and said that he smelled something familiar. That's the only reason he decided that she was a dragon. Our heroine didn't understand what he was even saying. Why was he calling her a dragon? What nonsense! Lindell asked him not to talk nonsense, because there was no way she could be a dragon. Melaine continued to hold her and advise her to stop playing. It was no use pretending she wasn't a dragon. He assumed she had mingled with the humans, but had been unlucky enough to catch his eye. Too bad. At that very moment, our heroine noticed that his eyes had changed, and she did not understand when he had managed to do so. Soon after, she remembered that Larocque was doing exactly the same. Are they somehow connected? The girl began to say in a hoarse voice that with such eyes, he himself was a dragon. However, she could not breathe, so this is probably how she would die. The guy told her that even dragons fight for survival when it comes time to die, but it's useless. All the people outside don't know what's going on inside. He blocked the door with magic so they can't get in. Smiling, he said that they could only do this after her death. Either way, he was surprised that she barely resisted. Soon he let go of her, and she fell to the floor. He asked in surprise, did she really not have the strength to resist some kind of weak smell? But what happened? Could it be the separation of the soul? So the heroine didn't understand what this idiot was talking about. Melaine suddenly said that she really seemed weak. Anyway, he grabbed her face and started asking how this could be. He wanted to know the reason Lindell, however, did not know the reason herself. The guy told her that if she can take the form of a human, then she is definitely not a cub. But why then is she so weak? Our heroine was incredibly surprised. How could he mistake an ordinary person for a dragon? What did he expect to see in her then? The girl moved away from him and said that the reason was too obvious. She was not a dragon, but an ordinary person. However, Melaine was surprised and asked why she was left alone. If she was so weak, her mother shouldn't leave her alone. Lindell was screaming because no one was listening to her. She said again that she was human, but Melaine told her that he would not fall for those words, so... Our heroine screamed again and told him to listen to her carefully. She doesn't have the mother he's talking about, and she doesn't have a family to look after her. She said that she didn't understand why he wanted to kill her, but nevertheless, she herself was not going to die obediently. Melaine still didn't understand how this could be. Even if she didn't have parents, Someone else would have taken care of them. It was a fact that dragons were selfish, but they cared deeply for those close to them. The girl started saying again that this is why she says she is not a dragon. Suddenly, she started coughing, and Melaine asked if she was okay. Lindell covered her nose with her hand and asked him to stop saying the same thing. He repeated that she smelled familiar and was talking nonsense that she didn't understand. The guy looked at her in bewilderment and asked where he got so much blood from. Could it be that this was also due to the separation of the soul? Lindell, meanwhile, wiped her face and continued to repeat that she was an ordinary person and dragons could not look after her. Melaine looked down at this point devastated and asked her if she had been abandoned just like him. With each word he said, the girl became less and less sure what this idiot was talking about. Was he really talking to her? In any case, he took her hand and said that apparently she had been driven to such a trick by the dragon. Our heroine sighed and said that it was true. The strangeness with the body appeared after the contract with Larocque, so it was really the dragon's fault. Melaine was very upset that she was abandoned and deceived. What scoundrels! Our heroine understood that she needed to find a way to escape from here. Suddenly, he asked if she wanted to take revenge. Our heroine asked him in surprise what he was talking about, and in response, he took her hand and said that if she wanted to take revenge on those who were going to kill her, then he would help her. That's why he... At that moment, the girl broke free from his hands and asked him to listen to her. She asked him if he had forgotten how he had strangled her. He had literally almost killed her himself. In such a situation, only he was the worst. The girl understood that there could be no talk of any revenge because she could not trust him. At that moment, the guy began to shake from the fact that he was doing the same thing as those scoundrels. Our heroine did not understand what was happening to him, but at that moment, he calmed down and taking her by the shoulder, turned to her again. As a result, the guy didn't even have time to say a word when suddenly a loud explosion was heard behind him. The reason for this was the emperor who created a breach in the wall, and he reminded Melaine that he had told him not to do stupid things. Our heroine was surprised that Senel came, but the dragon did not understand how he entered. He definitely closed the door with magic. At that very moment, Cyanel noticed blood and signs of strangulation on Lindell, so he started walking towards Melaine, saying that he was a fucking freak. A few seconds later, he used magic and asked the servant Lute in bewilderment how he dared to do such a thing. Without even waiting for answers, he used magic and fired a beam of flame towards the dragon. Our heroine understood that even if Cyanel was very strong, his opponent was a dragon. She needed to say this before the fight started. The girl ran up to the emperor and asked him to stop and not attack Melaine because he was not an ordinary person. Cyanel replied that he understood that, but that this freak was one of those who would die at his hands. Lindell was horrified and said that now was not the time to joke because he was not a human. Cyanel grabbed the girl and hugged her and said that he knew, this is not a man but a dragon. Our heroine looked at the emperor in bewilderment and asked him since when he knew about it. Cyanel answered that he knew about it all from the very beginning. He came here knowing that he was in the Temple of Lute, and he did not want to, but the matter required delay. Continuing to look at Melaine, the emperor told him that he knew much more than he thought. That's why this time he asked not to hide anything from him. Of course, he addressed both Melaine and Lindell. Cyanel shot out flames at the same moment and pierced the wall again. Melaine admitted that for a human, he had quite an amazing ability. In that case, he said that he was still curious now about how Cyanel knew that he was a dragon. The emperor at that moment created a portal behind him and asked why he needed to answer this question. As it turned out, it was a barrier made of mana, which meant that Cyanel had decided to protect her and fight alone. She would be stuck here and wouldn't be able to do anything. The girl knew that Cyanel was strong, but she certainly shouldn't forget that his opponent was a dragon. In a fight between a dragon and a man, it is obvious that the dragon will win. Melaine began to cast a spell and asked His Majesties if his skill had ended with a couple of rays of flame. They immediately began to clash using their abilities, but something was wrong. Lindell felt that, as expected, Senel was losing to Melaine. This was not going to last long, so she had to do something. She didn't know what to do or how to act. At that very moment, she felt a strange heat. However, this feeling of weightlessness was familiar. This is definitely Aurora's feeling. She definitely hasn't been able to use it since she signed the contract, But why did her powers come back? Even though she didn't know what was going on, if she could use Aurora now, she would be grateful. With this power, she will be able to stop these fools who don't even think of listening to her. At that very moment, she screamed and told them to stop. Soon there was an explosion, and the fragments fell to the ground. Cyanel asked her what happened. The girl, in turn, said that it was only a warning. She then said that if they didn't stop right now, she herself didn't know what might happen next. If they decided to measure their strength, then, at that very moment, something strange happened. Apparently, Lindell's body simply weakened from the strain, and she fell to the ground. Suddenly, all the strength left her body. But why? Her body became so heavy that she couldn't even move a finger. And by the way, she was very ashamed. His Majesty ran up to her in bewilderment and asked if she was okay. What had happened to her? As always, the girl wanted to say that she was fine, but at that very moment, she began to cough up blood. Melaine did not understand why she was vomiting blood if everything except her soul was fine. The Emperor turned to Melaine in confusion and asked him what had happened to Lindell's soul. He told him to look and answer the question of what was happening to Lindell. Melaine, seeing the terrifying energy from His Majesty, was even a little scared. He did not understand what kind of energy it was. Are people even capable of such a thing? Anyway, he said that her soul was fine. Now Sinel told him to call a priest, and the guy immediately ran, first. He had to save her, and then see what would happen. Cyanel asked the girl if she could hear him, to which our heroine only said that she was fine. The Emperor was glad to hear this, but asked her not to worry and not to fall asleep. She had to endure it, even if it was hard, because the priest would arrive soon. Looking at the pool of blood, our heroine thought about it and decided that everything was still strange. Before, when she was vomiting blood, she felt dizzy as if she was about to faint, but now, she just feels like these hands are heavier, but otherwise everything is fine. She doesn't feel any discomfort. Everything is not as usual. Just at that moment, Melaine arrived shouting and saying that he had found a priest. The man at that moment said in surprise that he himself could walk. The guy said that other people told him that this was the best priest of those who were outside. The man looked at Lindell in confusion and asked if she was okay. He was already here! Lindell instantly recognized the voice. Looking at Rook, she couldn't understand why her bad feelings always came true. The man was screaming at that moment and asking her to trust him. However, at this moment, Melaine smiled and said that he brought the best of those who were outside. Our heroine was in incredible shock and aggression, because that was the whole problem. After some time, the priests shouted at the guys in bewilderment, asking how they could fight next to the one who had just come to her senses. This is definitely unacceptable. The room was shaking so much that he thought there was an earthquake. Rook kept yelling at the men angrily for a long time, saying that fighting using your magic next to Lindell was the most stupid thing ever. Then he turned towards Melaine and shouted even louder, telling him that he was such an impudent fellow. He couldn't understand how such a treatment could leave such marks on the lady's neck. He had never heard of such a treatment. All Melaine could do was look down in disappointment and ask for forgiveness. That's exactly what he did. The man crossed himself and told the two of them to be careful. He would be watching them anyway. As soon as the priest left, Melaine said that according to the priest, she became like this because she took the emperor's curse upon herself. Can they tell about it? Sinel looked at him in bewilderment and decided to ask why he was so interested in this. Lindell, in turn, said that if he had heard about it, he could just as easily forget it because it was all nonsense. The contents of the contract with Larocque, that's what the curse means. Then she asked the dragon if he himself couldn't see that her soul was okay. The priest said that her soul is distorted because of the curse. Can't he see that her soul is distorted? The guy looked down and said he just couldn't see it. Lindell asked again, confused. Melaine explained that he can only recognize the existence of the soul living in the body, but he does not see its state. He does not see the soul with his eyes, but only feels it. When he examined her, everything was fine with her, except that she was weak and tired. However, he understood that if she was okay, then she certainly shouldn't be vomiting blood. As the priest said, her soul is corrupted, so it is understandable why this is happening to her, because a broken soul can destroy the body without leaving a trace. Our heroine asked in horror how this could be possible, to which the guy confidently said that it was possible. He had only heard of a man with a twisted soul once, and he was rumored to have died. The girl asked where he heard about him, and the guy said that a friend of the owner of the tavern where he often goes told him about him. Lindell laughed to herself, saying that such a source could certainly be trusted. Anyway, he looked at her again and asked her to tell him the truth. If she told him what this curse was, then maybe he could help. Our heroine, perplexed, asked him why he needed this because he wanted to kill her. Why did he need this? Melaine lowered his gaze and apologized to her, and then to the Emperor for trying to harm someone dear to him. He understood that it was hard to believe, but still he sincerely wanted to help, so he leaves, but promised to come back again. Again he apologized, and soon after he used magic and simply disappeared. Lindell didn't understand anything, but decided to ask Sionel if he really knew he was a dragon from the start. The guy nodded his head. Our heroine said in bewilderment that he knew this, but still left her alone with him? Why? The guy said that he was convinced. Lindell asked what he was talking about, to which the Emperor replied that he had hoped that he would simply not harm her. Lindell assumed that as soon as he left, Melaine tried to kill her. Sionel told her that he was mistaken, because he did not think that he was still so young and stupid. Our heroine didn't understand what he was talking about. Sionel took her hand and said that she didn't have to understand him, because it didn't matter. Lindell then decided to ask him what he thought was important. The guy kissed her hand and said that they needed Melaine to save her. That was all that mattered to him. The girl suddenly reached out to him and decided to ask what he meant by the words, "I know more than you think." Sionel told her that everything was so. Unfortunately, he was very smart and had an excellent memory. Lindell asked in bewilderment, "Was that really bad?" The guy looked down and said that she couldn't even imagine how terrible it was to remember everything that had once been experienced, especially misfortunes. Until now, our heroine thought that he lived a perfect life without any worries. But now, seeing his facial expressions, she understood that there was a deep sadness in him. Soon they returned from the Temple of Loot back to the palace. The Emperor was so busy that she did not see him at all. All this was because the Emperor was distracted by her when the founding day was so soon, and the Emperor had a lot of work to do. This allowed her to spend more time in her room, but she had to find something to do. Of course, the attempts to escape did not cease. Eavesdropping on what was happening outside our heroine assumed that there was no one there. Only after making sure that there was no one outside did our heroine decide that she should begin. She activated Aura again. She wanted to test it something like a sword, but what could she swing? Soon after, she found the perfect option, a candlestick. She immediately went to it. Taking it in her hands, she immediately realized that she had succeeded, because the aura began to transform into a candlestick. It seemed that she was doing even better than before. Soon the action passed. Although the time of using the aura is limited at best about 3 seconds, it would be nice if she could use it a little longer. At that very moment, the girl began to fall to the ground. Already lying on the floor, she thought that it would also be nice not to fall to the ground every time after using it. Her body was definitely stronger than before. Somehow she couldn't understand why she was losing strength so quickly and vomiting blood just after using Aurora. Should she take Estelle's medicine? While our heroine was pondering her next steps, Luna just entered the room. The further actions, after what she saw, were not surprising. Luna immediately screamed as loud as she could because she was horrified by the fact that she saw the mistress on the ground. After some time, our heroine was calming, the maid still saying that everything was fine with her. The girl cried and said that she was not okay at all. She did not understand how the lady could say this, being in such a state. Our heroine looked at the maid in bewilderment and told her that she only had blood coming from her mouth. However, at that very moment, the maid screamed in bewilderment and asked, "Why?" Our heroine jumped up on the spot. Lindell decided to ask again, but the girl still began to wipe away her tears and say that even if she told, nothing would change. Our heroine understood that things were bad because Luna apparently was very angry. Lindell continued to assure the maid that she was not injured this time. Showing her hand, she even began to show the bruise that was there from the last time, which had almost disappeared. Then she said about the wound on her knee that it healed in exactly the same way, and it was as if it had never been there. Luna pointed out in surprise that she was so good at talking about everything, but asked why she never called hers. Our heroine asked again in bewilderment, Luna explained that if she was not there, there were people standing behind the door. Then why had she never asked them for help? Lindell wiped her face and asked in surprise why they were called when she was in such a state. The maid was incredibly angry, so she screamed and asked Lady Lindell to listen to her. Our heroine looked down guiltily, apologizing to Luna. She was pleased that she cared about her so much. Anyway, the maid asked that next time if something happened, be sure to call her or the knights. At that moment, someone entered the room. As it turned out, for some reason, the emperor, frightened by something, ran into it. Lindell happily said that she was glad that Mr. Sinel had come, but she knew she was in trouble because he would get it all wrong again. Only upon entering the room did His Majesty see a whole heap of blood, as well as a candlestick lying on the floor. Coming up to her, he said that today everything was exactly the same. What would be the excuse? Last time she hurt herself on the edge of the bed. And today what? Was she exercising her hands with a candlestick? Our heroine laughed and asked His Majesty in surprise how he knew this. She really did arm exercises. Sionel looked at her angrily and asked if she was making fun of him. The girl laughed, saying that the candlestick was just right for swinging, so she was practicing fencing. His Majesty was incredibly perplexed by the fact that she was so stubborn. She said that today was a very good day for training. At that moment, a knight entered the room and apologized, but said that he had brought the priest as requested. Soon after they switched sides with the priest, Rook remained inside, but His Majesty went out into the corridor. Sionel couldn't figure out what the problem was. The knight apologized and said he should have been more careful. One way or another, he admitted that he did not feel any energy, and there were no signs of a fight either. Sionel bit his nails out of nerves and said that this time the same marks remained. The marks that remain after using the oar, and they remained on the candlestick. The knight at that moment told His Majesty that he had also noticed this, but still Miss Lindell could not use Aurora. Sionel himself understood this. Especially for Aurora, she cannot control her body properly. Also, using simple items other than a sword for Aurora is very difficult. She won't be able to do it even if she wanted to. Damn! He began to scratch his head nervously, not understanding what Lindell was hiding from him. At that very moment, Luna came out of the room and addressed His Majesty. The girl admitted that she wanted to tell him something, so she asked him to give her a little time. Sionel told her that he was busy now, so if it wasn't something important, she would tell him later. The girl said that it was important because it concerned Lindell. As soon as he heard this, he nevertheless turned around and ordered the maid to tell her right away. The girl said that something was wrong with Lindell. Sionel looked at her in bewilderment and asked if she had called him just to say that. Luna even trembled a little while she tried to collect her thoughts. Soon she said that, to be more precise, there was something strange in Lady Lindell's behavior. It seemed to her that she smiled too often lately, but the strangest thing is that her smile looks as if she does it for show. Everything is fine, nothing serious. She has been repeating this phrase very often lately, although she had never said it before. Lindell has become completely different. She has become more cautious sometimes. She is so categorical that it makes her shudder. However, as soon as she sees that her own maid suspects something, she starts smiling again and saying those words. The emperor sighed heavily and said that he did not understand what she wanted to tell him. He asked her to tell him everything directly. The girl clarified and said that she noticed how Lindell smiled only when he saw them. But as soon as no one is looking at her, her face becomes impartial again, and there is always something sad in her expression. The girl explained that she initially thought Ms. Lindell was doing this because she didn't want them to worry about her. She asked her to be sure to call if she felt unwell, but she showed that she was against it, saying that she did not want to show herself to anyone in such a state. Somehow, Luna thinks that there is some other reason why she pushes people away, that they all don't know about. At that moment, a girl appeared behind them, asking for forgiveness for interrupting them, but it seemed to her that Lindell was trying to cope with something dangerous alone. So dangerous that she can't ask for help, so maybe something strong has gotten in here, and Lindell is under pressure. The knight asked in confusion what nonsense this was since there were no signs of penetration. They had all seen it. The other knight, nevertheless, suggested that it made sense. One way or another, the girl asked for forgiveness, but reminded them that they had seen traces of the use of the oar, and so many suspicious things. At that very moment, a priest came out of the room, so the emperor turned to him and asked how Lindell was feeling. The man said that her whole body was weak and she had lost a lot of blood, but he checked her physical strength, and strangely enough, her body seemed healthy. The pulse rate is the same as a healthy person, of course, except for a few bruises, but this is a small thing, so everything is fine with her. The emperor looked at the man and said that she had lost too much blood. Was she really okay? The girl suddenly asked, what if it was the blood of the attacker? But the knight, calming her down, said that there was no one else there. The priest also said that he checked Miss Lindell's mouth, so it was definitely her blood. Cyanil then screamed and said that this was even stranger. She couldn't be okay after losing so much blood. The man also admitted that it was strange, because before she sometimes lost consciousness due to vomiting blood. But even if we accept the fact that she is fine, she still often faints, but she will definitely remain conscious. The man admitted that he himself could not understand what was happening, but he really wanted it. Looking at His Majesty, he only sighed heavily and apologized. Cyanel was wondering right now if all this was connected to the curse he was talking about. No matter how hard it was, and how much he didn't want to do it, he still ordered that the same abbot from the Lute Temple be brought here. The knight told His Majesty that they understood him, but decided to ask where he should be brought. Sunel asked to be brought to the basement. Soon after, the emperor asked to postpone all meetings, because he would now go to the empress's tomb. The guy was now determined to uncover the secret of Lindell's illness. Damn Empress! He would personally find out if she had done this. After some time, he together with Melaine walked through the basement. The guy was surprised and said that he thought that the emperors had everything pompous, but he did not know that they had such gloomy basements. Luckily, after a while they finally stopped. The dragon assumed that they were already there. Our hero didn't dare think for long, so he immediately opened the door and rushed inside. The thoughts in his head were relatively similar. He was angry that this damn coffin was still bothering people. Melaine was surprised that they put the coffin in this dungeon. He wondered who was inside that they treated him like that. Looking at this coffin, His Majesty the Emperor said that this was the coffin of a criminal. Melaine immediately began to examine this coffin. As far as he knew, the current Emperor Sionel was famous for executing his mother. He immediately assumed that his mother was in this coffin. Melaine turned and, after a smile, asked the Emperor what he wanted. Sionel looked at him in surprise and said that he was thinking about what he already knew. Why would he call him if it wasn't connected with Lindell? Melaine looked at His Majesty the Emperor and thought that this guy, although he was human, had something inhuman about him and behaved as if he knew everything about him. Sionel at this point told the dragon that he was too simple. It was not enough that he was wandering around the castle because he was worried about Lindell. He is also conducting an investigation into the Emperor. Is he happy with him? Melaine looked at Sionel in confusion and asked how he knew that. The guy said that he sent knights for him just recently, but he came running so quickly, so how could he not have guessed? He doesn't care about people, but he even found out about his mother's empress. Then it must have been difficult, pretending to the Emperor that he doesn't know anything. Melaine said in bewilderment that even if he knows and can find out many things since he is the Emperor, but still, how can an ordinary person find out about such things? Looking at the Emperor, he asked him who he was and what secrets he kept. Come to think of it, he was suspicious from the moment he met him at the temple. He acted as if he already knew him. Melaine admitted that although he is not interested in people, he remembers everyone he has ever seen. Besides, he would never forget a person with such a nasty look as his. Melaine knew for sure that he had never met him. So how did the Emperor know about him? Sionel asked in surprise if it mattered now whether he knew him or not. Melaine asked him again in bewilderment. The guy said he didn't want to see him act like he knew everything. Sionel shut him up again and told him to stop talking nonsense. Lindell was important to both of them now. And again, the Emperor said that if the matter did not concern her, then there would be nothing at all connecting them together. That's why he asked again to stop chatting and check if there was a soul in this coffin. He brought him here for this. With a heavy sigh, Melaine finally decided to get down to business. It turns out that His Majesty himself brought him here to check if the man he personally killed had a soul. The dragon looked at Sionel in surprise and asked if he was really afraid that a man killed by his own hands would simply rise again. Sionel told him that even if she resurrected, he would kill her again. But if Lindell was in danger because of it, then everything changed. That's why he ordered the corpse to be checked. Mullane noticed the emperor's grip. He had previously thought that all he could do was show off his magic tricks. Why was he so strong? He suggested that he was developing new abilities when it came to Lindell Bodabachna. The guy said that he understood the emperor and would check the coffin right away. Of course he could check for the presence of a soul, because he came here for Lindell. It turns out that the man in this coffin cast a curse on the emperor, which Lindell took on herself. The whole time the process was going on, the emperor stood nervously to the side and bit his nails. Mullane soon said that there was no soul here, and the woman was definitely dead. Cyanil was so nervous that he couldn't even control his emotions, so he constantly bit his fingers until they bled. In any case, he looked at the pot next to the coffin and asked what about it. He asked to check it too. Mullane asked the emperor in bewilderment if he had really gone mad. How could there be a soul in this pot? Cyanil told him not to talk too much and to check right away. Mullane sighed heavily, but there was no other choice, but he still said that he was not a servant. Not understanding why he needed to check the pot at all, he nevertheless knelt down and lifted the lid of the pot. He asked in horror what it was. Moving away a little, the guy asked the emperor what he had put there. Cyanil said it was the heart of a sorcerer. Mullane said he understood it, and he understood it was a heart. But why was it still beating if there was no soul in it? The emperor was surprised that even he had no soul. Mullane asked him if he was listening to him. Cyanil was sure that Lindell was being harmed by a curse that left no trace. Then the curse was cast by someone other than the empress, or these were the consequences of the curse. The emperor racked his brain trying to figure out what was causing harm to his beloved Lindell Mullane. Meanwhile, asked him to explain what was going on since he had called him. His Majesty turned around at that very moment and asked Mullane to remain in the palace. The dragon, perplexed, asked why, but in response, he received words that he would have to do something. Meanwhile, Lindell has gone so far as to have all the contracts written on paper made from the bark of a 200-year-old tree. It was originally written in the Jakersey region. This region, in turn, follows the southern current of the Eastern Strait. Our heroine was incredibly confused. Why the hell were these useless details written into the contract? Why did she need to know where the Jakars region was? Now she understood why Laroque had only shown her 13 pages of the contract. There might be important information there, so she couldn't just skim through the pages. At that very moment, the knight knocked on Lady Lindell's door and said that guests had come to see her. The girl immediately began to hide everything in a hurry. She knew it. Of course, someone came to her just when she decided to read the contract. A moment later, Duke Cassirs Areta entered the room and told Lady Lindell Bodabachna that they had not seen each other for a long time. Our heroine looked at him and did not understand why he came. It would be fine even if he was a duke, but why did Julia Areta come with him, who looked at Lindell with disdain and said that they had not seen each other for a long time? Lindell didn't understand why they came. She didn't even think that she would ever meet these people. If these two came to her, it only meant that Cyanil had already told them that he would make her empress. Looking at Julia, who did not take her eyes off Lindell, our heroine understood that she was the most likely candidate for empress. However, she asked to hear her that it was not she who asked to be made empress. At this point, Cassiars asked Lindell Bodbachna how she was feeling. Our heroine smiled and showed her muscles, saying that she was already feeling much better. The guy said that he was very happy because they were all very worried about her. He asked the emperor many times to meet her, but he did not allow them to do so. That's why he apologizes for them coming. Only now. Lindell said there was no need to apologize because she was already grateful that they came. Lindell understood that it was she who should ask for forgiveness, because everything was clear from Lady Julia, who did not take her eyes off her. She's probably mad at her for taking away her chance to become Empress Lady Julia. Just let her explain. Our heroine decided to ask them why they came to her. After all, they came to her together, not just to find out how she was feeling. Cassiars said that they came to her because they were worried about her. But still, as she said, there is another reason. In that case, our heroine asked to tell them what they had come for. Cassirs just sat there silently for a long time. Soon, he finally said one word: Empress. They had come to talk about the Empress's place. It was exactly as Lindell had thought. It had to happen. Cassirs said that they heard that the Emperor was going to make her Empress. Lindell caught herself again, as she had expected. Both of them were dissatisfied. Since they had come together, Julia was probably even more dissatisfied. In principle, it is understandable, because she lost the opportunity to become empress overnight. Of course, she is offended. Nevertheless, she begged herself to calm down. She had to explain that she was not interested in herself, instead of the empress. Perhaps they could break Sihanoul's stubbornness. She asked them to continue with what they had to say. However, Lindell assumed that they would ask her to give up her position as empress, and she generally knew that anyway. At that very moment, Kassir said that he hoped that she would become empress as soon as possible. At that very moment, the room became silent. What? Julia joined the conversation and said that both the emperor and the empire needed her, Lady Lindell Bodibakna. Our heroine certainly didn't imagine this conversation like this. Didn't they come to dissuade her? The emperor and the empire need her. What nonsense! The girl still asked to explain what they were talking about. Why did the emperor need her, and what did the empire have to do with it? Julia, as expected, saw Lindell's surprise. They knew that even such a small thing would cause her such confusion, but still, how sweet she was. Although Julia was as serious as a stone in life in her thoughts, she was delighted. And how could Lindell be so down to earth? Then she noticed Lady Lindell's fragile, thin wrists and was surprised. Had they always been like this? They were thinner than a fork. Julia was in incredible shock. What does the imperial chef even do? Can't he cook what Lindell likes? All these factors were quite annoying. She did not understand why the vice commander of the guard had become so weak. Julia still expected to see her, as she remembered her earlier. At this time, our heroine was still talking about her own in bewilderment. The action takes us back in time to one of the dark alleys. Some girl suddenly started screaming loudly, saying that she couldn't believe it. Young Lindell asked the robbers in bewilderment how they could steal someone else's thing and then threaten her with it. Adults can't do that to a child. Two men, who had clearly already received retribution from Lindell, spoke of how hard life was for them. Our heroine, nevertheless, ordered them to shut their mouths and live honestly. If she catches them again, they will be finished. Lindell was incredibly angry at the behavior of these scoundrels. Julia looked guiltily to the side all this time. Soon the rescuer turned to the girl and asked if she was okay. In any case, she said that this area was dangerous, and there were a lot of suspicious people. Hearing nothing in response, our heroine assumed that this girl was from a rich family. She asked that next time she go with an escort. However, this time, Lindell told her that she would take her to where she needed to go. She was so happy when she met her at the palace. Lindell had seemed strong and fair to her since she was a child, and she expected to see her like that and hoped that she would remain like that. However, now looking at her, already more tired, she felt even more sorry for her. That was exactly how Julia saw her. Still, she decided that too much time had passed since then, and although she looked weak inside, she was still unshakable. Julia knew that her willpower could bring His Majesty's empire into order. Only Lady Bodibakna could do all this. The girl looked intently at her so-called mentor and thought that she would always support her. However, Lindell had a misunderstanding, because Lady Julia looked at her too suspiciously, as if she wanted to hit her. Cassiers turned to his sister and said that he knew that Lady Bodibakna liked her, but he still asked her to stop looking so mean. The girl told him to shut up. Our heroine suddenly said that she would like to know why they so wanted her to accept the title of Empress. Cassier smiled and asked for forgiveness. He said, however, that they had a reason for it. He said right away that the emperor had been canceling meetings every day lately. Sihanoul has almost stopped dealing with state affairs because he is focused on other things, and he does this because of Lindell. Julia clutched her fan in anger and asked her brother to speak normally, as Lindell was uncomfortable. Cassiers immediately said that he did not blame her for this. She simply misunderstood them. His Majesty's obsession is getting worse every day, which is why she is locked up here. Cassiers even said that he actually thinks she is more of a victim. Lindell sheepishly asked if they really thought so. The guy then said that as far as he knew, she still loved the emperor too. He was convinced of this after he saw her. Cassiers ended his words by saying that only her love could fix their crazy emperor. Our heroine assumed that this was a rather strange conclusion. Cassiers said in any case that they need her because she can love and at the same time save the empire, And by the way, he asked for forgiveness for calling the emperor crazy. At this point, Julia jumped up from her seat and said that she was worried that the empire was left to a prime minister who couldn't string two words together. Cassiars asked his sister how she could say such a thing about him, but the girl said that Lady Bodbachne would understand everything perfectly if he explained why they wanted her to become empress. The girl decided to explain everything instead of her good-for-nothing brother. The aristocracy wants to make her empress for only one reason. Her personal qualities are to blame for everything. Our heroine asked, in surprise, if it was really about her abilities. Julia told her that the wisdom in understanding a situation, the far-sighted insight, and the ability to understand people all belong to her Lady Lindell Bodebachnes. She possesses all these qualities, and that is why one cannot refuse the position of empress being an ideal candidate. Our heroine, nevertheless, said that Lady Julia also possesses the same skills. The girl sighed and said that not everyone was able to see this, but imagining Lady Lindell Bodbachne as an empress was another matter. Soon she got up from her seat and walked towards Lindell, telling her that she wanted to say something. Our heroine knew that she was not happy as expected. However, at that moment, she stood before Lady Lindell and said that she was worthy of the title of empress. Our heroine asked again in surprise. Cassiers began to tell his sister that such talk could be dangerous. Julia asked her brother to sit still and be silent. The girl took Lady Lindell Bodebachne's hands and with cute puppy eyes asked if she didn't want to become an empress. She even said that if Lindell so desired, she could start a rebellion. Instantly, our heroine changed her mood, because now she wanted those two to leave. Lindell gave in and stopped thinking. Cassiers at this point told his sister that they had said everything they wanted, so it was time to go home. Then the guy apologized to Lindell for coming so unexpectedly. Our heroine said that everything was fine. Shortly after this, they headed for the exit. Cassiers said goodbye to Lady Lindell, and then noticed his upset sister and asked what was wrong. The girl sighed heavily and asked Lady Lindell if she could ask her for something. Our heroine agreed, surprised. The girl looked at Lindell and asked her to finally understand His Majesty's behavior. In her opinion, it is obvious that he is wrong in locking her up here and suppressing her, but His Majesty knows that this method is wrong. The reason for this is that His Majesty has fallen in love with the free Lady Lindell, but this is the only way for him to keep her. Unfortunately, she couldn't really understand him fully either, so on the one hand it was sad. One way or another, even though he shows it incorrectly, His Majesty still loves her. This is what Julia wanted to convey. Lindell asked why she suddenly decided to talk to her about this topic. It was quite unexpected. The girl said she heard that something was happening to her lately. Her room was a mess, and she began to lose consciousness frequently. Cassier said that she is keeping quiet, so people have no choice but to just watch more vigilantly. But until she says anything, they can only speculate. Looking at his hands, he said that this was why they were worried about her and her health. Even if they are not so calm, and there is no need to talk about His Majesty, they are on her side, and this will not change for anything. It was only for this reason that the boys asked Lady Lindell to finally trust His Majesty. The action moves to the evening of the same day, somewhere in the palace. Sunel was heading somewhere. Soon he entered his office and was immediately asked why he had returned. Only now Cassiers was sitting on the bed, and the emperor immediately asked him what he was doing there. Cassiers said he had so much work that he could not leave, but it seemed the emperor had mounted his horse again. Sionel began to anxiously scratch his head and tell the guest that if he had come here to grumble, then he had better leave immediately. Cassiers stood up and shouted that he was grumbling because he was always stubborn. He wanted to destroy everything that could threaten Lady Lindell. It was impossible to do that. The guy continued to say that at this rate there would be no one left in Lindell's entourage. Sunel suddenly slammed his sword on the table. Then the emperor said that if Lindell was safe in this way, he was ready to do anything. The boy told His Majesty that he still shouldn't cancel all meetings for this reason. In turn, Sionel told him that now that he had put on the dragon collar, he had another reason. Cassiers looked at the emperor in bewilderment and asked what dragons he was talking about. Sionel turned to Cassier Zareta and asked him not to try to understand everything. He does not want to kill him yet. Also, His Majesty seemed to be even busier now than he was. Then he asked if he had really gone to Lindell. Cassiers screamed and said that he went to beg her to stop him. Some nobles are starting to rebel because meetings are constantly being cancelled. Sionel himself must understand that his rule is now in a precarious position. The emperor's personal affairs were to blame. The man sighed heavily and told Cassiers that he had even more complaints. He asked to stop talking about it and bring him documents on drug distribution. He was already tired of catching them. Cassiers put a few more letters on the table, saying that if he did this too, the nobles would notice. They still asked him to stop. His Majesty looked at Cassiers in bewilderment and asked whether he should pay attention to what people thought of him. He asked the boy not to make him laugh and not to do stupid things. Cassiers, as expected, that only Lady Lindell could cope with His Majesty. The guy understood that no one would listen to his words. At that very moment, someone knocked on the door. Who could it be at such a time? As it turned out, one of the knights entered the room, asking for forgiveness. For the late visit, Cassiers asked what had happened. Lindell then crawled into the room and asked the knight to let her in. At that very moment, the girl saw Cassiers and Sionel in the room. The girl was surprised to meet the Duke there, who asked in surprise what she was doing there so late. She was confused. Was Duke Areta here because of overtime? Besides, she noticed that he looked worse than before. Lindell understood that if he worked like that every day, then it was understandable why he wanted to change the emperor. She could not become empress, but she could at least offer him her sword. Sionel at this point angrily said that there was no point in assigning knights to her since they were useless. Lindell knew he didn't mince words at all. The girl said she asked the knights to come here. Soon she bowed down and asked not to punish those who were innocent. Anyway, she told the emperor that she wanted to say hello to him. Then she did say hello. Sionel sighed and reminded Lindell that he had asked her not to wander around the palace alone. In any case, he wanted to know why she was so late. The girl said she had something important to tell him. She thought she was telling him and showing him with her actions, but she turned to him and said that she apparently had not understood him, so she decided to say it directly. She did not want to live locked up anymore, so she asked to be let out. The emperor, as always, began to say that this was unacceptable because she was sick. Our heroine interrupted him and said that she would not die. Sionel immediately screamed and told her that she was still lying to him. Lindell said that they were in this whole situation because she kept quiet the whole time. She admitted that it all started when she said she wouldn't be with him anymore. At the time, she thought she was doing it for him. However, this time it was different. Taking the emperor's hand, she said that she wanted to be by his side, but to do so, she had to complete some work. Looking into Sionel's eyes, our heroine said that she liked him incredibly and she would never leave him alone. She also assured him that she would not die, so she asked him to trust her and understand. Watching them, Cassiers joyfully began to think that the hour X had come. He felt that it was time for him to leave them alone. The guy immediately headed for the exit and said that he remembered some important things to do. Before leaving, he waved his hand and told them that they would see each other later and that they could talk and take their time. Shortly after the door slammed shut and they were left alone, Lindell knew immediately that she was in trouble. Our heroine certainly didn't plan to stay alone in the room. Looking at the emperor, she noticed his face, the expression of which spoke for him. It was as if he was ready to kill someone right now. It was in her head that Sionel would ask her, incredibly embarrassed, if she had spoken about her feelings sincerely, that she would not leave him. Lindell should have put on the sweetest smile and told the emperor that she had only him in her heart. At the end, they were supposed to whirl around in a dance, but apparently this plan was too naive. In any case, the girl did not understand why he was silent. He should at least say something. Sionel suddenly said that he was listening to her so she could speak. Lindell said in surprise that he should now answer her question. She would like to hear what he thinks about what she said. The guy said what he was thinking. Our heroine then asked to find out what he was thinking about right now. The emperor looked at her and said that in his head, he was thinking about what thoughts were stored in this little head. Our heroine didn't understand. Was he really adding fuel to the fire? One way or another, there was a better way. Sionel suddenly asked how much more she was going to exceed his expectations. Lindell, puzzled, asked what that meant. He wanted to know what she had been hiding from him all this time. He thought she would tell him or explain it to him, and this moment had finally arrived, and he was getting a confession from her. In any case, he took her hand and pulled her towards him. Sional said that was also not bad, but he really couldn't handle her. Our heroine was incredibly embarrassed, so she began to tell His Majesty that at this rate her heart would jump out of her chest. At that moment, the guy kissed her hand and said that just a few minutes ago he was angry, but how nice it was to hear such words. However, Lindell at that moment covered his nose and said that if he liked it so much, he should have said so right away. Lindell was perplexed about how she got so upset when he didn't answer her. Sional asked why she was upset if she already knew his feelings. The girl asked in confusion what she could know. The guy told her straight out that she knew that he was in love with her. Lindell's eyes were spinning. She had to pull herself together. She reminded herself that she had promised to be decisive no matter what she heard. That was why it was not Sional sitting in front of her, but potato! In front of her sits a beautiful potato that will not change her behavior for anything. Sional approached her in bewilderment and said that the emperor was sitting in front of her now, and for some reason she was thinking about something else. He, looking into her eyes, told her that she was quite brave. Lindell pulled away in confusion, saying that he was too close. He must understand how handsome he was. Sional said that he did not understand what she was talking about. In any case, he turned to her again and asked her to tell him again what she had said. Lindell said he was handsome. Sional sighed and said that was not what he meant. He reminded her that she had said that she liked him. He asked her to say it again. The girl said in surprise that she had already said it, and did he really want to hear it again? She said that just looking at him makes her heart feel like it's going to break. She doesn't just like him, she loves him. Sional was incredibly happy to hear this. In response, he said that he loved her too. He always wanted to tell her this. Lindell was crazy about how handsome he was. Was this the day her unrequited love was answered? The girl smiled and said that she understood him, so she asked him to stop teasing her. Sional said in surprise that he wanted to tell her about his feelings as soon as he saw her. Lindell screamed and said he was doing it again. She asked him not to tell her lies. Sional said he understood that she didn't believe him. One way or another, he told her that she could be angry and swear at him because it was all his fault. Our heroine asked him again in bewilderment, and soon told him that she was fine, so he shouldn't cry. Sional admitted that he is afraid of losing her and wants to believe her, and moreover, he should believe her, but he cannot. Unlike her, he has too many fears. He was too self-confident and trusted people easily, and that is how he lost everything. Holding Lindell tightly, he explained that he no longer wanted to be unhappy. The guy kept hugging her, asking her to stay close to him. He wanted to hear her say that she loved him and that she would not leave him. Our heroine stroked his head and told Sional that she would not leave him. She herself wants him to be happy. Or rather, she has wanted him to be happy since the first time she met him. She thought she would make him unhappy, but fortunately, it was not so. The girl said that she did not know why he was so worried, but the way not to lose her was very simple. Approaching him, she said that he should continue to say the same words as he did today. At that very moment, their lips finally met. Lindell asked Sional to love her. Shortly after that long-awaited kiss, Sional stroked the girl's face and said that she could now do whatever she wanted. Lindell asked if that was true. The guy asked in surprise if it really looked like he was lying. Our heroine smiled and said that she didn't think he would allow it so quickly. Sional said he was still scared, but he liked seeing her free. And besides, she told him a way not to lose her, so she will trust this way. He said he was confident he could use this method and soon return to her lips. After that day, Sional removed the knights he had placed for Lindell because they were no longer needed. Although he still forbids her to go outside the castle, she received the Empress's castle and felt calmer. After she arrived here, the pressure on her to become Empress increased. Still, she wasn't going to become Empress right away. That wouldn't have happened without it. Although all of them were under pressure to some extent. However, our heroine thought so only until this morning. This morning, Sional was looking after her and stood next to her even during training. Our heroine asked him in surprise if he was busy, to which the emperor replied that he was busy. He was working right now. Can't you see it? The girl told him that if he was busy, she advised him to go to the palace to work. Sional reminded him that he told her that he was already working. Taking care of the future empress was also his job. He felt like she was also having trouble concentrating, so he hugged her and suggested that she take a rest today and be with him. He said that the weather was fine today, so he suggested going for a walk. The knights, in turn, watched the plot unfold intently. Lindell told the emperor that he was busy, and besides, she couldn't concentrate because he was constantly looking at her. If he left, she would start doing better. Sional sighed heavily and said that she was very cruel. He asked her if her feelings had changed already. Even the knights who were watching everything that was happening were shocked by this development of the plot. Our heroine screamed in bewilderment and told him that her feelings had not changed at all. They would remain the same even if he behaved like a child. Lindell reminded him that the foundation day was coming up, and he shouldn't be here. Sional nevertheless pointed to Cassirs. The emperor said that all this was already taken care of by a talented prime minister. Lindell assumed that his talented prime minister was about to start a rebellion. Every time she sees the duke, she feels very sorry for him. It seems to her that he is becoming thinner and more emaciated. Our heroine asked Sional if she could hear him. The guy in turn suggested that she go to the gardens to rest. The girl realized that apparently he couldn't hear her after all. Lindell approached His Majesty and asked him to leave her alone because this is not freedom. The guy looked at her again in bewilderment and asked if she really didn't want to be with him. And again that pitiful look. Our heroine told him that it was useless to make such a face at her. She asked him to return to the palace quickly. Sional once again lowered his head and said plaintively that he had apparently gotten to her. The boy apologized and said he would control himself. The knights behind him began to assume that His Majesty was acting this way because he was in love with Lady Lindell. Our heroine assumed that the emperor was doing this on purpose, so she asked him directly. The guy, surprised, said that he did not understand what she was talking about. In any case, he said that if she was uncomfortable around him, then there was nothing she could do. The knights were perplexed and said that Lady Lindell was too cruel. The girl screamed angrily and said that she agreed to go with him into the garden. The emperor smiled happily and said that in that case they should go. Lindell was really pissed off about all this. Who knew that such a reserved and cold person would suddenly change so much? She hates herself for allowing him to behave like this. Still, they went into the garden, and it was all only because the emperor was too nice. As soon as they reached the entrance, the boy turned to the servants and said that they wanted to be alone. Our heroine was very surprised by this because usually he always goes with them. The girl looked at Sional and asked why they came here. They could have walked anywhere else. Entering inside, the emperor told her that she loved flowers. Our heroine asked again in surprise. She said she rather liked bouquets of sausages, something like this. However, Sional continued to say that she preferred small and fragrant flowers. He pointed down and showed her some beautiful, small, neat flowers, saying that she liked those better. The girl asked the emperor how he knew that she would like such flowers. It was still so surprising that he knew more about her taste than she did. Could he really read her mind? What should she do then, since she had already imagined too much about him? Sional sighed at that moment and told her that she was thinking about something strange again. Taking her hand, the emperor said that only her gaze, usually involuntarily, falls on what she likes. That's why he can see every little thing, and he's been watching her even longer than she thinks. He immediately reminded her that last time he said that he wanted to tell her that he loved her from their first meeting. Looking at her, he said that he had held back with all his might in order to get to know her as much as possible. Lindell thought he wasn't interested in her at all and didn't know he was so attentive to her. Apparently, she knew little about him. However, he said that if she had no questions, they could move on. Smiling, he said that he wanted to show her something else, and these flowers were just the beginning. Walking through the greenhouse, our heroine thought that although she had lived in the imperial family for a long time, she had no idea that the greenhouse was so beautiful. It was so beautiful and pleasant here that it was possible to completely forget. But she still remembered that Sional wanted to show her something. Just when the girl wanted to ask him about something, the emperor turned to her and said that they had already arrived. Our heroine saw this place for the first time and was therefore surprised. Sional said that it was not strange that she did not know, because he forbade everyone to come near here. However, he assured her that she would like him very much. After kissing Lindell, he said that he hoped that she would like him. The girl, horrified, said that this was not the case at all. Lindell exclaimed in confusion and asked if they had raised the dragon without her knowledge. Cyanil came to his senses in confusion and looked ahead. In front of them, they saw a dragon no less surprised than they were, who was eating plants. Immediately, he, a little perplexed, greeted the emperor, and Lindell, who perplexed asked how a dragon ended up in the imperial greenhouse. Our heroine looked at Cyanil and asked if what he wanted to show her was really a dragon. Nevertheless, Cyanil asked the bastard through grinning teeth why he was here. Apparently this was not what he had in mind. Without waiting for an answer, the emperor again asked the dragon what he was doing here. Coming closer, he told him that this was completely unworthy behavior for a great dragon. At that moment, he guiltily turned away from them. Nevertheless, Cyanil asked the dragon in surprise if he really wanted human flowers so much that he burst in here. The dragon asked the emperor to shut up, asking if he really thought he was eating them because he wanted to. Our heroine immediately realized that dragons feed on flowers, but she had never seen Laroque eat flowers. However, what was more surprising was that the emperor and the dragon spoke so boldly to each other. How long had they known each other? Although if you think about it, Cyanil hates dragons, so she couldn't tell him about the contract. Then what's going on here? Cyanil suddenly told the dragon that he was pathetic. Lindell waved her hand and suggested that if she understood correctly, they were raising him. The emperor looked at her in confusion and asked why he would raise something like that. The dragon in turn also asked why he needed to grow up with someone like that. Lindell laughed in surprise. At that very moment, the dragon ran to Lindell, saying that he was not angry with her. It was all because of the evil emperor. Our heroine asked him in bewilderment how he knew her name. The dragon looked at her pitifully and asked if she really didn't recognize him. Cyanil laughed and asked why she should remember him. The dragon suggested that she might not remember, of course if she was trying to forget bad memories. Then he started talking about the Temple of Loot. At that moment, our heroine puzzled over the puzzle and came to the conclusion that this dragon is the same priest from the Temple Malane. The dragon was now glad because she recognized him. However, the girl was rather terrified because in front of her stood the same crazy dragon who had tried to kill her. After some time, Malane took human form. Lindell asked the emperor what this dragon was doing here and why he was eating flowers in someone else's greenhouse. Cyanil pointed to the flowers and explained that these flowers contain mana, which is so necessary for dragons. For dragons, it is something like a symbol and life force, which is why dragons are drawn to mana. Actually the same as that useless dragon Malane objected and said that he ate them because he wanted to. Looking at the emperor, he said that it was all because of him. Our heroine in turn did not understand why they were arguing, but she was angry. Anyway, at that moment, the guy decided that they would forget about it for a while and immediately suggested that Lindell eat the flowers too. She needs to eat more of them because she is weak. The girl, perplexed, said that she had no attraction to eating flowers. Malane, surprised, asked who had it, so he asked her to eat faster. The girl, however, said that she really didn't need it because she couldn't use mana. As soon as she refused Malane, she noticed that his face instantly changed, so she decided to ask what happened. He said that he now understands why she is in such a state. She could not use her power, even though she is a dragon. She was weakened, she was abandoned. The girl, perplexed, said that she was a human Malane, however told her that she could not hide it because he was also a dragon. Lindell still insisted that she was a human. Coming closer to her, he took her hand and said that he wanted her to be frank with him. The guy said that he understood that she could no longer trust him. But what he said next was no longer so important because he had already started an irreversible process. Because Malane got a little confused about who was who, Cyanil decided to remind the dragon and hit him on the head. The dragon, perplexed, told the emperor that he was a psycho gone mad. Why was he fighting? Cyanil, perplexed, asked how he dared touch her. The guy assumed that Lindell had nothing to say to him. He should be grateful that they let him stock up on mana, so he better get lost. Malane, nevertheless, reminded the emperor that he needed mana because of the tasks he assigned him. He had been patient with everything for too long. Lindell was tired of hearing this senseless squabble, so she stood between them and told them to shut up. She started telling them that they were not children, but then why were they behaving like that? Everyone urgently needed to calm down. Then she turned to His Majesty and asked what kind of work he was entrusting to the dragon. Cyanil said he gave him the job because magic could be useful. Malane laughed in bewilderment saying that it was not he who gave him the job, but he who deigned to agree. Lindell screamed again. She assumed that he was given a job after all. Then how is magic used in the palace? No one here except Mr. Sionel can use magic. The emperor said that, if he allowed it, it would not be so difficult to use magic in the palace, but there were still restrictions. That's why you have to use 3 to 4 times more mana than usual. Mullane said that. Because of this, he spent so much energy that he needed mana. In that case, the girl decided to ask what kind of magic they used, that he began to lack mana. Oh, last time he was so good at magic. So what kind of magic required so much effort from him? The emperor at this point responded instead of the dragon, and said that the palace barrier had recently been breached. He decided that the forces of those in the palace simply would not be enough. That's why he personally asked the dragon to help them. Mullane nodded his head and said that he helped repair the barrier. Our heroine was surprised that Sionel, who hates dragons, decided to ask him himself. When Laroque used magic, the barrier was strong by the way. She clearly understood that at the moment, something was being closely hidden from her. Just a few days later, Sionel was again busy with matters of concern to the emperor. Perhaps the duke, who was barely hanging on while doing Sionel's job, decided that at this rate he would simply die. That's why he dragged Sionel along with him. Thanks to this, after her release, she seemed to truly feel free for the first time. Moreover, she received an invitation to a ball on the occasion of a national holiday. The girl turned to the maid and said that, although it was a ball, she did not think that this dress would suit her. She wanted to know if she could go in uniform. Luna asked in confusion what Mrs. Lindell was talking about. This time she would not go there as a guard, but as His Majesty's partner. Our heroine, however, said that such a dress, all in lace, beautiful and bright, would be more suitable for a nice lady and not for her. Luna didn't understand what was so special about just wearing this dress. She assured the lady that she would look beautiful in anything. Shortly after these words, she put on the dress at Lindell and said that this dress should definitely. A moment later, she pulled it off and said that maybe the dress didn't suit her. Lindell asked if she felt that way too. Luna replied that she was told that such dresses are the most popular. Now how so? Perhaps they don't have much time after all. However, she said that they would find a designer who would make a dress especially for her. She asked to trust her. Lindell advised her to use that passion in something else, but she felt it was better to just go with the uniform she's always worn. Luna screamed again and said that she would not let her go in uniform. All the other ladies would come dressed up in all their glory. Almost with tears in her eyes, the maid told her mistress that at this ball she needed to show herself and prove who would sit in the Empress's place. She knew for sure that there had to be a dress that would suit Lady Lindell. Our heroine was thinking at this time that although she wasn't particularly against dresses, choosing and sewing, one was no easy task. She hadn't even tried it on yet, and she was already tired. At that very moment, a girl knocked on the door of the room. As it turned out, it was Lady Julia Arita. Lindell did not understand why she had come, but asked to come in. As soon as the girl entered, she asked the future empress if everything was okay with her. Lindell smiled and said that she was fine, and that she could come in here. The girl thanked him, but in any case, apologized for coming so unexpectedly. Looking around, she immediately realized that Lindell was choosing a dress for the ball. The girl asked if they had already chosen one. Our heroine sighed heavily and said that she was still thinking. It's not that she doesn't like dresses, but Julia suddenly said that it is necessary to wear a dress to balls. The main thing is to wear something that suits her so well that she shines. Luna looked at the lady and said that she thought so too, but Lady Lindell wanted to wear a uniform. The uniform suited her, but she couldn't wear knight's armor to the ball. Julia, however, said that even the uniform does not necessarily have to be the same. Luna immediately assumed that the lady meant to wear something different from the others. Then, Lady Lindell would be the most noticeable in the crowd of girls. Julia told the maid that she had understood everything quickly, but she had still made some mistakes. The girl asked in surprise what she had made a mistake about. Julia immediately exclaimed, saying that even in a lady's bag, Lindell would stand out from the others. Such beauty cannot be hidden. Luna said that she was right. Taking the maid by the hands, Julia told her that she knew a lot about beauty. Our heroine, meanwhile, was wondering what the girls were talking about. At that very moment, the girl turned to Nellie and asked her to bring what she had prepared. shortly after she handed the box to Lindell and said she hoped she liked it. Our heroine asked in surprise what it was. Opening the box, Julia said that it was her gift for her. Lindell was perplexed. This form was very beautiful and luxurious. The girl said that she came up with the design herself, so she might be missing something. However, if she doesn't mind, she can wear it to the ball. Our heroine was shocked that she came up with the design herself. She had no idea that she would receive such a valuable gift. It was the first time she had received something so thoughtful. Holding the box in her hands, Lindell smiled and thanked Julia from the bottom of her heart. She promised to wear it to the ball. The girl smiled at that very moment and said that she should be grateful to her. Our heroine smiled back at that moment and told the girl that the smile suited her very well. She hoped that in the future, she would see her smiling more often. Immediately after these words, an unknown and incomprehensible silence hung in the room. Our heroine didn't understand what was happening. Did she really say something wrong? Nellie was addressing the lady at that moment and asking her to come to her senses. The maid patted her on the back and asked her not to faint. She needed to collect her thoughts. At this point, Julia didn't even know what to do. She started repeating herself incredibly, and her heart was beating too fast. Nellie, at this point, asked Milady to calm down, because in front of her now stood not Lady Bodebachne, but a broom. Lindell cried out in bewilderment. The maid asked her not to say anything, otherwise Julia might die on the spot. Nellie, horrified, told Lady Lindell that she had exceeded the limits of what Julia could endure. Lindell, puzzled, asked what she had done. The maid bowed down and said that they could not stay here any longer because it could end badly for Julia, so she would take her back. Just before leaving, Julia thanked Lady Bodebachne for her words. Now she thought that she had lived a good life. Lindell and Luna watched their guests with bewilderment, not even understanding what had just happened. Will someone explain to them what had happened? Luna laughed and said that Lady Julia was indeed a spontaneous person. Lindell couldn't help but agree. At that very moment, a puzzled Sionel entered the room and asked what had happened, that they were all so downcast. Our heroine said something surprising, because nothing happened. She said that she herself would like to know what the reason was, if there was one. She was simply paying a compliment to Lady Julia. Lindell said that a beautiful dress or a beautiful smile is a frequent compliment. Looking at His Majesty, the girl asked why he had such an expression on his face. Sionel, at this point, told the girl that she needed to be a little more aware of her surroundings. Lindell looked at him in surprise and said that she didn't think there was anyone who thought more about their surroundings than she did. Sionel said that it was, but still Julia was a bit of an unusual case. In any case, he asked the girl not to tempt anyone but him. At that very moment, our heroine cried out in bewilderment and asked what this meant. Lindell asked who it was she was tempting here. Sionel told her that if she didn't know, then he didn't know what to say either. Looking at the box in her hands, he assumed that she had received a gift. Cassiers was very boastful about how good his sister was at handicrafts. Our heroine, nevertheless, took another look at this form and said that she really did have golden hands. Soon she took the form out of the box and showed it to her emperor. She asked if it was really beautiful. Lindell said it was a valuable garment that she had promised Lady Julia to wear to the ball. Sionel agreed with her and said it would suit her well. Anyway, he then said that, on the other hand, he was a little sorry. Lindell looked at him in surprise and asked why. Taking her hand, the emperor said that the ball gown, the accessories, he wanted to give it all to her. After all, this was the first ball they would appear at together. Lindell, however, told him that they had many balls ahead of them, so he shouldn't be too upset. Anything he gave her would be special to her. Sionel smiled, looking at her, and thanked her for saying that Lindell didn't understand how a person could smile so beautifully. She sometimes even thought that it would be better if she were still in unrequited love. Then her heart would be healthier. By the way, she asked why he came. The guy said that he had certainly been beaten to it, but he had a present for her too. The girl asked in bewilderment if it was really her birthday today. There were too many presents. Holding out the box in his hand, the emperor said he hoped she would like it. Our heroine looked at it in surprise and asked what it was. As soon as she opened the box, the emperor immediately told her that he hoped she would wear it to the ball. Now he saw that it would suit her uniform even better. Lindell looked at the gift with delight and said that it was very beautiful, and she really liked the color. The stones looked like his eyes. Cyanil suddenly touched her face and said that he wanted to make the stones the color of her eyes. But she understands that he is very greedy. He felt like he needed something that would indicate who she was with. Lindell became more and more embarrassed with each word he said and did not understand how sweet this greedy man could be. However, the girl said that she would repay him in kind. Cyanil laughed and said that from the outside, it might seem as if he had wronged her. The girl screamed in bewilderment and said that he had really done something wrong. If only he knew what he was doing to her heart. He too should feel his heart explode. Cyanil started laughing and telling Lindell that she hadn't changed at all. He didn't understand how she could be so consistent. The girl asked not to tease her, but at that moment, Cyanil said that since he had given what he wanted, he would go. Lindell asked in confusion if he was leaving already. The emperor turned to her and reminded her that she loved freedom, so he thought she wanted him to leave. The girl nevertheless told him that it was not necessary to leave like that. The guy laughed anyway and said that he would be back soon. Soon our heroine was left alone with herself. Sometimes such peace seemed like a dream to her. She also felt like she was going to burst because she couldn't handle the heat. In any case, she could still control herself now. However, if it gets any worse, then she might have to use the medicine Larocque gave her. Although looking at it, she understood that if it was ordinary, then there was no need to take it. With a heavy sigh, the girl asked when Larocque would finally arrive. At that moment, someone whispered to the girl who Larocque was. Our heroine jumped up in bewilderment. She asked in horror why he entered so quietly. Melaine laughed and told her that there was a way for everything. From what he had heard, she had been feeling better lately. Lindell sighed and told him that he could see her in general. She thought to herself that even though Melaine had done nothing wrong, he was already pissing her off. The dragon at that moment was glad that she was okay, and that this psycho, or rather the emperor, did not tell him about her condition, and he became curious. By the way, he said that the smell was still weak, but he thought she was better, so he was happy Lindell asked in surprise if she really smelled. Melaine looked at her and said that she smelled like a dragon. He thought it was because she couldn't use magic, and again he started to speak for himself. When will he stop? Our heroine told him straight out that she was tired of hearing the same thing. She was born a human and lives a human life, and she will die a human too. Does Melaine understand what she is talking about? He turned away and said to himself that it must be very hard for her, that she wanted to become a human so much. He apologized to himself. The girl, perplexed, told him that he had confused his thoughts with his words. Anyway, the dragon asked if she really wanted to become a human because she couldn't use mana and no one needed her. Using mana isn't that important. Our heroine said he was right. Mana is absolutely unimportant to her. Melaine said she was great. The main thing is that she is Lindell. The girl sighed and said that they were done with this topic. Now she wanted to know why he came to her. The guy looked at her in surprise. Our heroine assumed that he had come to tell her something important, and in secret from Mr. Sionel. Looking again at the now strange dragon, the girl ordered him to tell her why he came here. Melaine looked down in surprise and said that he only came to check on her condition. Lindell asked him to lie more convincingly because he couldn't even look her in the eye. She asked what the problem was. Melaine was still silent, so our heroine screamed in confusion and ordered him to answer her questions. The guy, horrified, said that he would tell her now. The dragon looked at the girl and asked what she liked about the emperor. Lindell, puzzled, asked why he needed to know that. Melaine said his question was whether she wanted to take this man as her partner. They say that the emperor has dragon blood in his blood, but that doesn't change the fact that he is still a man's. If a human and a dragon become partners, then in the end only she will suffer. That's why he doesn't think this person is valuable enough for her to have to go through this. Our heroine asked him if a partner was really a problem that was worth thinking about. Melaine surprisedly told her that she was carefree. Lindell assumed that by partner, he meant the person they were marrying. That was a question to think about seriously, but she still thought he was exaggerating. Melaine looked at her in confusion and asked if he was really exaggerating. He was surprised that she did not know what a partner means to a dragon. The boy suggested that it was because she had been separated from her pack since she was a baby. Lindell didn't understand what he was talking about, but asked him to stop looking at her with pity. Our heroine suddenly asked the dragon if the emperor had asked him to find out about the empress. Melaine asked in surprise what she was talking about. He assumed the emperor had told her something about partners. Lindell asked if they were really called partners. He had already asked her to become empress. Melaine's expression changed at that moment. He asked again. The dragon couldn't believe that this psychopath had done this. Lindell looked at the dragon in horror and asked what was causing him to get so worked up. Melaine told her that the emperor was not himself. In anger, he said that if Sunel had been in his right mind, he would not have dared to ask her for such a thing. The guy said that he understands that Lindell likes the emperor and that she values him, but he asked to think again about partners. After all, even though he said it, he will say it again. The emperor has gone mad. Lindell, however, I told him that she knew it too. Melaine looked at her and asked what she was talking about. The girl said straight out that she knows he's not himself, but she still likes him. Apparently there's something wrong with her too. However, she told him that if he had decided to come to her to tell her about it, it was something to worry about. She understood the madness, but she could not let him die. Although it was shameless to ask for such a thing, she asked to stop Sunel if he suddenly lost his temper. Melaine wanted to say something, but our heroine interrupted him and said that her first impression of him was not very good, but it seemed to her that he was not so bad. Although she doesn't know what a dragon's partner is, she asked him not to worry so much, because what he calls a dragon's partner has nothing to do with her. Melaine smiled and said that he understood her words. Soon dark energy began to appear around. Lindell asked if he was leaving. The dragon told her that he should go back, since he came here during his working hours. Our heroine, however, said that she thought he would tell her about the dragon's partners. Would he just leave? Melaine reminded her that she had said that everything would be fine, so why should he explain anything else to her? If she was still curious, she could come to him herself. Soon after these words, he moved back to the emperor's office, who apparently was asleep. Melaine looked at him and asked himself if such a man was worthy of being emperor. At that moment, Sunel suggested that he had given him too much freedom. Looking at the dragon, he told him that he was more like some kind of thieving cat. Melaine jumped up. Wasn't he sleeping? He was sitting with his eyes closed. Sunel looked at the dragon in bewilderment and asked if he really had to explain even that. Melaine looked at the emperor thinking that, in any case, he seemed to be a dangerous and scary person. He did not feel any energy from him other than human. However, the dragon understood that as a human, everything about him seemed too unreal. The boy suddenly asked the emperor if he knew anything about the dragon's partners. Sunel said that this is when the dragon and his beloved exchange proofs and promise each other to be together forever. The proof seems to be Yolin. Yolin is like a heart for a dragon, and the partner who receives it holds the owner's life in their hands. It's pretty cruel, even though it's a proof of love. Melaine told him that he is creepy. How can he know this in detail being a human? And Lindell, in turn, knows nothing. The dragon suddenly screamed and told the emperor that he wanted to become Lindell's partner, since he had already asked her to become the empress. Melaine slammed the table and decided to say it again. He asked not to bother Lindell anymore, because he didn't know how the confinement might end. The emperor, however, looked into the dragon's eyes and said that he did not understand what he was talking about. Melaine shouted in anger and told him not to pretend that he didn't know anything. Sunel suddenly stood up and told the dragon that he had been chatting. He suggested that he stop interfering and mind his own business. The emperor also noted that he did not even have a shortage of mana. Melaine was very angry. Looking at this freak, he didn't understand what Lindell liked so much about this guy. Although Lindell has a similar past to his, she now lives a life that is completely different from his. At this point, Sunel continued to address the dragon and ordered him to leave his office and finally get on with his business. Melaine looked at the red thread and did not understand how the girl learned to feel affection for someone. Even though it had nothing to do with him, he still didn't want to leave it like that. Well, after a few days, the celebration of the Foundation Day began. All the people were happy that day because it was a big event and the whole village was full of life. And the palace, by the way, was also preparing for the banquet that will take place tomorrow night. And when everyone is so busy, our heroine, who has nothing special to do, spent most of her time in the training room. She watched the knights train and even tried to train herself. For the first time in a long time, she was doing what she wanted, and she seemed to be feeling better. After some time, Utilia was perplexed and asked what happened to the exciting love triangle. As one could understand, she was now reporting on her exploits in love relationships. Our heroine, perplexed, asked what kind of love triangle they were talking about when she said that it wasn't so. Her friend told her that His Majesty himself told her not to seduce anyone. Anyway, she said, Lindell is cool. Melting the heart of His Ice Majesty is still a success. Our heroine asked if she should consider these words as a compliment. Utilia, at this point, decided to ask a more personal question. She was curious how far they had gone. Lindell spat out all the tea she had just drunk. Our heroine, perplexed, asked her friend since when she had become curious about this. Utilia reminded her that she used to pester His Majesty every chance she got, and she was curious about how far she had gone. Lindell asked her to stop being nosy, and her friend suggested that she was only being brave in words. The girl said that this was her first relationship, so it was okay. Utilia said it was true. Although she was pining for His Majesty, she had never had a relationship, so she was a newbie. At that very moment, someone behind her said that this was just proof of how pure and innocent Lindell's nature was. As it turned out, it was Julia who asked what could be stronger than a pure and innocent nature. Utilia was very surprised to see her there. She hadn't heard her approach. When did she have time? Lindell greeted the girl anyway. The girl asked our heroine if she and Julia were so close that she could come to her without warning. Lindell said that it happened that way. Julia suddenly assumed that she had disturbed them, as she assumed that they were having tea here. Our heroine said that everything was fine, and she was only glad to see her. Anyway, she asked what brought her here. The girl said she came to talk about repairing the uniform she would wear. She had to wear only the best. Lindell told her that she tried it on last time, and it fit her perfectly. She liked the design, so she could leave it as is. However, Julia said that although it is perfect no matter what she wears, she wants to see it in person. The girl repeated several times that she wanted to see Lindell put on the uniform she had made. Lindell said that she understood, but asked Julia to calm down. Utilia asked her friend in bewilderment if she had really lived like that while she was gone. Our heroine laughed and said that it was not so. Then the girl said that she would go and put on her uniform, and she would have to wait here. The girl said that she would wait for her here. Utilia asked if she should help, to which our heroine said that she would be grateful. At that moment, something strange started happening around Julia Mana. For some unknown reason, started circling around. Utilia said in bewilderment that she was here, and our heroine looked at the guest in bewilderment. The girl asked Lady Areta to calm down, to which Julia said in horror that it was not she who was exuding it. Soon something began to emanate more and more from her, and the girl screamed and asked to help her. Lindell told her friend that it was a mana cluster and needed to be blocked by an aura. Utilia said she already figured it out. Our heroine was horrified by the accumulation of mana, which was too large because it did not allow Lady Julia to be seen. But what happened? Lindell decided that she needed to somehow save her, while Utilia created the aura anyway. Noticing the spear hanging on the wall, our heroine immediately grabbed it because it was very useful. She thrust her spear inside the dome and began asking Lady Julia to take her hand. As soon as our heroine grabbed Julia, she screamed and asked Utilia to act now. The girl instantly began to concentrate a huge amount of aura energy. After a while, the room became quiet again. The mana was stopped, and only the devastation spoke of the recent battle. Once Utilia had completed her task, she turned to the girls in confusion and asked if everything was okay with them. Our heroine was horrified, as she said that she was fine. However, her heart seemed to be on fire for some reason. Why suddenly? At this time, Julia guiltily and fearfully began to say that she had not done this. Just after a while, people ran into the room, asking what all the noise was about. The man entering the room asked why the doors were broken, but then he noticed everything else. The devastation was incredible, so he asked in bewilderment what had happened here. Utilia told the butler that there was a mana cluster here with Lady Areta at the center. The girl immediately ordered that His Majesty be informed that someone from outside had attacked the imperial palace. After some time, knights gathered in the room and examined all the traces. Creon Frutdante of the Imperial Guard looked closely at what they had found. In the end, all they were looking for in the courtyard area was mana boosters and barrier destroyers. Utilia said that it was indeed an attack. She thought it was strange that a mana surge, experienced by low-ranking mages, appeared in a mid-ranking mage, plus mana boosters and even barrier destroyers. All of this indicated that it was intentional. Creon told her that she was right. The girl asked in bewilderment, "How dare these bloodthirsty bastards look down on the Imperial Guard so highly?" Pan asked her to calm down. Utilia asked in bewilderment, what kind of calm could they be talking about? What was the reason for the attack on the palace, which had been empty since the Emperor's ascension to the throne?